Fairy Tale, Eyes of Time. The village where he grew up was attacked by a dark guild, and no one in the village survived. Before dying, the young boy Charlotte awakened the magic eyes of time. He came back to life, walked out of that remote village, and faced the magnificent magic world. Chapter 1. Ishgar Continent. Fiori Kingdom. Hulu village is a remote village located in the southeast of the kingdom. In the Fiori Kingdom, with a huge population of 17 million, a small village like Hulu village with just over 100 people seems inconspicuous. However, such an inconspicuous village is facing a disaster right now. Boom! A strong tornado blew in Hulu village. Under the ravages of the tornado, the houses in the village, which were almost all made of wooden materials, were as brittle as paper and were torn into pieces by the tornado. At the same time, the lives of the villagers of Hulu village were harvested one by one. In the sky above Hulu village, a naked man with blue stripes on his body and only a black cloak on his upper body laughed wildly at this scene. A strong wind magic was surging around him. It was this wind magic that allowed him to stand in the sky as if he were walking on flat ground. Why? At the front of Hulu village, which was completely destroyed by the tornado, a sturdy middle-aged man looked at everything with red eyes and shouted angrily. There was bright red blood flowing all over his body, but he seemed to be unaware of the pain in his body, because at this moment, his heart was more painful than his body. In his right hand, the sturdy man was holding a silver-white samurai sword. This samurai sword was longer than ordinary samurai swords, and at this moment, the silver-white blade was stained with a lot of bright red blood. Why? Eligary heard the sturdy man's angry roar, but he showed disdain and said with a teasing smile, "Why? Do you need a reason to kill some ants? I'm bored, I'm looking for some fun. If I want to blame someone, I should blame your village, which happened to be on my way back home and became my tool to relieve my boredom." Just because of boredom? The sturdy man gritted his teeth, his face became ugly. Boredom, just because of such a crappy reason, his most cherished village was destroyed. How could he accept this? You will be punished. The wizards of the regular guild will not let you go, and the council will also execute you, the trash of the dark guild. The sturdy man gritted his teeth and said, "Ha ha ha ha." Eligary laughed as if he had heard a big joke. He sneered, "As for those old antiques in the council, you actually count on them. What else can they do except come out to clean up the mess after the matter is over? As for those flies in the regular guild, even if they don't come, I will do it to them." When mentioning the regular guild, Eligary's eyes flashed with strong disgust and murderous intent. Not only him, but most of the members of the Dark Guild hated the regular guild very much, otherwise they would not fall into darkness. Behind the sturdy man, there stood a 15 or 16-year-old boy. The boy's eyebrows were like swords and his eyes were like stars. Although there was a lot of dust on his cheeks, it could still be seen that he was an extremely handsome boy. The boy's name was Charlotte, and he was the son of the sturdy man. He grew up with his father in Hulu village since he was a child. The people of Hulu village were simple and honest, and every household treated him very well, so he had been living a carefree life since he was a child. And this kind of life, until today, was completely shattered by the tornado that seemed like the end of the world. The villagers who treated him like a family member, the friends who played happily together in the past, fell one by one under this ruthless tornado. The innocent smiling faces turned into faces of fear before death. All this happened just because of the man standing in the void, just because of his boredom, because he happened to pass by. Because of boredom. Because I just happened to be passing by. No, Charlotte shook his head and cried in his heart, "It's not because of these, but because I'm too weak." At this moment, Charlotte clearly understood that the real cause of the disaster in Hulu village was because he was too weak. Weakness was the original sin. At this moment, Charlotte regretted why he didn't pay attention when his father taught him magic when he was a child. When he was a child, his father told him that magic comes from the heart. If you use your heart to feel the world, you can awaken the real magic and become a great magician. But at that time, he didn't care. He was carefree in the village and had no concept of learning magic. He didn't think about what would change if he became a magician. He just knew that he was happy in the village. Charlotte clenched his fists tightly. From childhood to adulthood, he had never longed for power as much as he did at this moment. But soon, his fists loosened, and he laughed at himself, and the whole person became decadent. What's the use of him longing for power now? It was too late. Now, he and his father were the only two people alive in Hulu village. Soon, they would both die. What kind of power could they talk about? Unless time could go back. However, what even Charlotte himself did not realize was that when he was craving for strength from the bottom of his heart, a tiny blue light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Xiao Luo. At this moment, the burly man suddenly turned around and looked at Charlotte. His eyes softened, and he said with a trace of self-blame on his blood-stained face, "It's Dad's fault that he can't protect the village and you. I wanted to wait until you were an adult to take you to those big cities to see the world and let you see the powerful wizards of those big guilds. But now it seems that we father and son don't have that opportunity, sorry, Xiao Luo." The sturdy man's eyes were red and tearful. Charlotte was stunned. He had never thought that his father, who was always so majestic, would show such tenderness to him. Moreover, his father, who had shaped him into a tall and majestic image since he was a child, actually shed tears at this moment. Was it because he blamed himself for not protecting the village and him? As the only magician in Huluo village, the sturdy man has tried his best to protect the village in this disaster. However, he is just an ordinary magic swordsman, while the other party is a magician with a great reputation in the Dark Guild. What can he do with such a huge gap in strength? Even now, even if he is exhausted, he can only wait for death. Chapter 2. In Huluo village, Charlotte suddenly opened his eyes, uttered a faint murmur, subconsciously supported himself with his hands, and sat up from the ground. "Am I not dead, Charlotte?" Had a confused look on his face. He placed his hand on his chest. He could clearly feel the strong and powerful heartbeat coming from it. However, in his memory, he had clearly been pierced through the heart by the wind blade, and was dead beyond deadness. Could it be that it was just a dream? No. Charlotte suddenly woke up and looked to the side. There, the sturdy man was lying flat on the ground. Charlotte rushed over. The sturdy man's hands and feet were cold, without any warmth, and there was no breath coming out of his nostrils. It seemed that he was not alive at all. "Dad, and everyone." Charlotte turned his gaze elsewhere and saw familiar faces in many places, but these faces were the same as those of the sturdy men, lifeless, with only corpses. What happened? Charlotte walked through the entire village. He was the only living person left in the village. In his memory, the village that was destroyed by the tornado has now returned to its original appearance. There are doubts everywhere. What he wants most now is for someone to suddenly rush out and answer his questions. At this moment, Charlotte's body suddenly shrank and he squatted down. A sharp stinging sensation came from his eyes, as if he was pricked by a needle. He couldn't help but groan and quickly covered his eyes with his hands. This pain lasted for more than 10 seconds until sweat continued to flow from Charlotte's forehead and it stopped. Charlotte took a breath and gently put his hand down. A blue light suddenly flashed in his deep pupils. He lowered his head slightly, and understood a little. He whispered to himself, "So that's how it is, the power of time." The magical power that pulled him back from hell and restored the entire village to its original state came from the power of time. The Eyes of Time. What Charlotte awakened before his death was the magic he named the Eyes of Time. Eyes that contained the power of time, eyes that could create miracles. But why am I the only one who was resurrected? Having understood what kind of magic he had awakened, Charlotte naturally knew why he was reborn. However, since the Eye of Time resurrected him, why couldn't it also resurrect his father and the other people in the village? Thinking of this, Charlotte quickly shook his head and laughed at himself. He seemed to be too greedy and didn't take the resurrection seriously. He had heard his father mention that in this world, any magic that blasphemed life was taboo. It was a miracle to be able to revive him alone. It was a bit too much to revive the whole village. People always have to learn to be satisfied. But the former Charlotte did learn it, but now he doesn't want to learn it. Since a miracle happened to him once, why can't it happen a second time or a third time? Time is the power of miracles. Now that he has this power, he also has the opportunity to create miracles. Moreover, he has died once. After rebirth, he naturally does not care too much about other things. He just wants to pursue what he wants with all his heart. In the past, he might care about the so-called taboos, but now, it is hard to say. It must be said that before and after rebirth, Charlotte's mentality has undergone earth-shaking changes, or it can be said that after the appearance of Allegory, his mentality began to change. He understands that only by having strength can he control his own destiny and protect everything he wants to protect. He couldn't do this before. But now, he has awakened the eyes of time and has the potential to become the strongest wizard in the world. Maybe when he can really control time at will, he can really create miracles, change fate against the will of heaven, and bring people back to life. A week later, at the entrance of Hulu village, Charlotte was wearing a black robe and standing upright at the entrance of the village. His handsome face was solemn and dignified. In front of him, there were small mounds of earth, and under each mound was a body of a Hulu villager. "Dad, and everyone, I'm leaving," Charlotte said softly. He had made up his mind. Today he would leave the village where he had grown up, go out into the world and see the big city and the big guild that his father talked about. Of course, he had another goal when he left this time, which was to find the man who had ruined it all, and then kill him with his own hands to sacrifice to Hwaluo. Death, Elagor. The ugly appearance of Elagor with a cruel smile appeared in his mind. Charlotte's eyes suddenly became sharp, and the murderous intent in his heart rose uncontrollably. At the forefront of all the earthen mounds, a silver-white samurai sword was inserted into the ground. Charlotte's eyes condensed, and his big hand swung forward. With a clang, he pulled out the sword and held it horizontally in front of him. Several eerie sword lights flashed on the silver-white blade. This sword was exactly the one held by Charlotte's father. Under the reversal of time, the originally broken sword was no longer visible. The broken long sword also merged together again, and it seemed that because this sword was closest to Charlotte, it was baptized by the power of time at the moment Charlotte awakened, so some changes occurred. At the intersection of the handle and the blade, there are fine stripes, as if the cracks that appeared when it was broken before have not disappeared completely. The stripes are intertwined, and the appearance is a bit like a lotus. Unlike the silver-white blade, the lotus-shaped stripe pattern presents a bright red rich color, which forms a sharp contrast with the silver-white blade, but adds a bit of charm. This bright red is as if the blood of its original owner is flowing on it, eternal and never dry. Looking at this knife, Charlotte's eyes finally fixed on the enchanting red lotus pattern. A touch of nostalgia flashed in his eyes, and then he became determined. "From today on, you will be called Jdao. Absolute Blade. Red Lotus Heavenly Dance." As if sensing the absolute killing intent in Charlotte's heart, the blade suddenly revealed a bit of cold and sharp aura, and the red lotus seemed to become more vivid. After naming the knife, Charlotte inserted it into a pitch-black, simple-looking scabbard. As the blade was sheathed, the cold aura on the absolute knife also subsided, and the whole thing became very ordinary. "The day you unsheath, I will kill Elagor with my own hands." After saying this coldly, Charlotte put the knife on his back, looked at Hwaluo village with nostalgia, and then put on the hat on his black robe, covering half of his face. He exuded a cold aura, and then turned and left. Chapter 3. In the year X782 in the kingdom of Fiori, a 16-year-old boy named Charlotte Gerd walked out of the small village of Navalo and embarked on his own path as a wizard. A legend began. A small town in the south, Lauren. On the wide streets, pedestrians from all over the kingdom shuttled through. On the left side of the street, a man in a loose black robe was walking slowly. Nearly one-third of the man's face was covered by the black robe, leaving only the face below the eyes. Because of this, even the pedestrians who passed by him on the street could not see his complete appearance, but from the exposed parts, they could roughly infer that this man in black robe should be a young boy. Behind the man, there was a long object wrapped completely in black cloth. From the appearance alone, it was impossible to tell what was inside the black cloth. The man walked all the way and came directly to a hotel on the east side of the town. In a room on the second floor of the hotel, the man pushed the door open, then took off the long object behind him, and casually pulled off his black robe, revealing the black short sleeves inside, as well as his complete face. His eyebrows were like swords, his eyes were like stars, and even though his face had no expression, he still looked very handsome. This look was definitely Charlotte. Charlotte came to the desk, took out a magazine, put it on the desk, and then flipped through it carefully. After about half a quarter of an hour, Charlotte turned over the last page of the magazine, snapped it shut, and threw it to the corner of the desk, where there was a thick stack of magazines of the same type that was half an inch high. Charlotte shook his head and said to himself, "There is still no useful information, but as expected, Fairy Tale is in trouble again. What an interesting guild." What he just read was the very popular Magic Weekly published in the Kingdom of Fiori. Magic Weekly mainly published the big and small news happening in the major magic guilds of the kingdom, which allowed citizens all over the world in the kingdom to learn about the latest situation of those guilds at the fastest speed. Not only that, in the second half of this Magic Weekly, there were also many rankings of the characters of each guild. There are many kinds of these lists, and their main purpose is to satisfy consumers' strong desire for gossip. It is also because of these lists that the newspaper that publishes this Magic Weekly has made a lot of money. Now it has been a month since Charlotte left Hulu Village. After leaving Hulu Village, Charlotte was not in a hurry to find Allegory for revenge, because although his awakened magic was very powerful, he was still just a magic rookie who had just started to learn magic. What he needed most now was to grow up in the shortest time. From childhood to adulthood, Charlotte had not left Hulu Village many times, and his understanding of the entire Fiori magic world was even less. The only information he knew was from his father's occasional sighs. He was now alone outside, and it was necessary to understand some necessary information, and the fastest way to understand this information was to rely on these Magic Weekly. A week ago, Charlotte arrived in the town of Lauren, which was only considered medium-sized but well-known in the kingdom of Fiori. The first thing he did was to buy all the Magic Weekly magazines in the past 2 years at the local newspaper office. He just went out and bought the latest issue of the Magic Weekly magazine. Through these Magic Weekly magazines, Charlotte also had a preliminary understanding of the magic guilds in the kingdom of Fiori. At least he basically remembered those famous regular guilds and some famous people in these guilds. However, the one that impressed him the most was a guild called Fairy Tale. The reason why this guild impressed Charlotte so much was not only because there were many powerful wizards in this guild, but also because the wizards of this guild were too active. All the tasks they performed, no matter how big or small, would cause certain damage to the local area. It was precisely because of this that the wizards of this guild could be seen in almost every issue of the Magic Weekly magazine. In this way, it was difficult for Charlotte not to be impressed. Through the window, Charlotte looked at the sky outside, then jumped directly onto the bed and lay down flat. It was still daytime, and Charlotte was lying on the bed, not sleeping. A blue light flashed in Charlotte's eyes, and then he felt a flicker of spirit, and then his consciousness escaped into his eyes, and then he entered a dark and empty space. In the space, at a glance, it was all dark. The only light was a river formed by the convergence of blue light spots in the center of the space. Countless light spots kept flashing, just as gorgeous and beautiful as the Milky Way in the sky. Beside this blue river, a light and shadow condensed, it was Charlotte, to be precise, it was Charlotte's consciousness. And this space is the time-space bred in his magic eye of time. Charlotte also discovered by chance during a practice half a month ago that there was a world in his eyes. At first, he was a little overwhelmed when he accidentally entered this space, but after he came here several times in a row and discovered some functions of this space, this confusion was completely transformed into excitement. The beautiful river formed by the blue light spots beside him was named the River of Time by Charlotte. As for whether it is related to the legendary River of Time, it is unknown. Chapter 5. The long River of Time is the most important component of the entire time-space. It can even be said that a large part of the reason why the time-space exists is due to this long river of time. The blue light spot in this long river is actually the source of the time magic of Charlotte's magic eye of time. When Charlotte died in Hulu Village, the eye of time awakened. In his eyes, the long river of time was born, forming a time-space, and at the last moment, it autonomously mobilized the huge source of time magic in it, causing the area of Hulu Village to form a time reversal, and even resurrected Charlotte, the owner of the Eye of Time. This shows the importance of this long river of time to Charlotte. In the space of time, Charlotte's figure sat cross-legged. At the same time, in the long river of time beside him, the brilliant blue light suddenly flickered and surged, like a real river rolling, and a mysterious breath suddenly filled the entire space of time. Seeing this scene, Charlotte's mouth rarely showed a smile. He already knew that when the waves in the long river rolled, it was also the moment when the most terrifying ability in this space was activated. Change the flow rate of time. That's right, what surprised Charlotte most about this space was that it had the ability to change the flow rate of time. Through the rolling of the source of magic power in the long river of time, the flow rate in the space of time will change with the outside world. When the long river of time rolls autonomously, the flow rate in the space of time is 2:1 compared with the outside world, that is, 2 days in the space of time is only 1 day in the outside world. However, Charlotte has experimented that he can mobilize his thoughts to speed up the rolling of the long river of time, so that the flow rate of the space of time and the outside world will change more. After several experiments, he was able to increase the speed of time to 5 times to the maximum extent. 5 days of practice in the time-space was equivalent to 1 day in the outside world. However, this situation, which required him to accelerate the flow of time through his mind, would consume his mental power to a certain extent. When his mental power was consumed to a certain extent, he would be forcibly kicked out of the time-space, and then his spirit would fall into fatigue. Fortunately, as long as he had a good night's rest at night, his mental power would recover quickly, and he would become full of energy again the next day. And Charlotte found that every time he used his mind to mobilize the long river of time, his mental power would increase slightly, allowing him to maintain the time flow rate a little longer next time. Although the increase was not large each time, it was a huge amount accumulated over a long period of time. Obviously, this method of using his mind to modify the flow rate of time autonomously can hone his mental will. And in the future, as his strength increases and his understanding of time deepens, his mental will reach an extremely huge level. By then, he might be able to make the flow rate in the time-space reach a larger proportion. Not only that, Charlotte also found that when he went against the flow and slowed down the rolling of the source of magic power in the long river of time, the flow rate in the time-space would be reversed from before. The outside time was slower, and the flow rate in the time-space was faster. Of course, after the experiment, Charlotte would not do this stupidly again. After all, for him now, every bit of time is extremely precious. Especially he didn't know when he would face his enemy, Eligary. After all, Eligary was an old wizard who had been in the magic world for many years. Although he was confident that he could surpass him sooner or later, it still took time. The emergence of the time-space and the powerful ability it showed would greatly shorten this time. Moreover, seeking revenge on Eligary was only one of Charlotte's goals at this stage. He had more magnificent dreams and hopes in his heart. He wanted to go further on the road of magic, pursue the true meaning of time, step onto the top of the magic road, and finally, revive the village that existed in the deepest part of his heart and restore its former vitality. It takes a lot of time to do all these, so when Charlotte discovered the existence of the space of time, he was so surprised. You know, in the past few days, Charlotte has learned about many wizards from major guilds by reading the Magic Weekly in the past 2 years, and there are many magic geniuses among them. The most exaggerated one is that one of the magic geniuses has become an S-level wizard at the age of 15. You know, once you step into the S-level wizard, it means that this person has become one of the top strong men on the continent. On the other hand, when Charlotte was 15 years old, he was still like a frog in the well, staying in Hulu village, and even magic had not awakened. The gap between the two is not small. Fortunately, now he has a place of practice that can be called a cheating weapon, the space of time. As long as Charlotte uses the time flow rate in the space of time to practice for many years, as time goes by, this gap will become smaller and smaller until it is surpassed. And Charlotte is confident that the Eye of Time he awakened is definitely the top magic. Through the Eye of Time, he can fight across levels even if there is a gap in magic power. Charlotte, who was sitting cross-legged beside the long river of time, closed his eyes gently. Soon, a layer of blue light film lingered around Charlotte. The appearance seemed to be composed of blue light spots in the long river of time, and the mysterious aura in the time-space all enveloped Charlotte. This requires us to mention the second effect of the time-space. Chapter 6. After awakening the Eye of Time, Charlotte's practice is naturally mostly about understanding the power of time. Ice, water and other familiar forces in nature, time has always been an illusory existence. It cannot be seen or touched, but it is undeniable that it does exist. Because all people and things in this world can be said to be dominated by time, because no matter how powerful you are, as long as you cannot live forever, one day you will be annihilated in the long river of time and turned into a handful of dust. This is the power of time. And Charlotte, who has the Eye of Time, has initially mastered the medium of this power. What he has to do is to try his best to feel this magical power until he can control it, go against it, dominate time, and become the master of time. However, as mentioned above, time is too illusory. Even if Charlotte awakens the Eye of Time, it is not an easy task to comprehend the power of time. What's more, he has no guidance from his predecessors and can only rely on himself to explore everything. In short, it's just one word, difficult. And this has to mention the second function of the time-space. Charlotte discovered that in the space of time, meditating and practicing near the long river of time, he could feel the power of time much more easily than in the outside world, as if there was a force of energy leading him to feel the power of time. Whenever he practiced here, he would have a clearer understanding of the word time and a more thorough use of the Eye of Time. In addition to the speed of time here, I believe it won't take long for him to be able to independently comprehend the various magical uses of time. Beside the long river of time, Charlotte sat cross-legged, motionless, with a blue light film covering his body, like a dream, as if it were eternal. Time passed by bit. At this moment, Charlotte's long eyelashes trembled slightly, and his eyes suddenly opened. At the same time, the blue light film covering his body also dissipated like bubbles at this moment. A thoughtful expression flashed on Charlotte's face, and he stood up immediately. He stretched out his right hand, and the blue light surged in his palm. A samurai sword appeared out of thin air. The style was exactly the same as that of the absolute sword. After a slight glance at the samurai sword in his hand, Charlotte's eyes suddenly became sharp, and then his body moved, and the sword in his hand also moved. Whoosh whoosh. The sword moves with the person. Charlotte's swordsmanship seems to drift flexibly, but in fact there is no rule. It is completely what he thinks about in his mind. Because Charlotte also has no one to teach him in this regard, everything can only be understood by himself, and now Charlotte is not thinking about swordsmanship, but has other ideas. At this moment I saw Charlotte's speed suddenly increase, and the speed of swinging the sword in his hand also became faster, more than twice faster than before, and this increase in speed is still increasing. Until a certain moment, Charlotte's speed seemed to reach a limit, and then he saw that his figure suddenly turned into a phantom, and his speed broke through this limit. A brilliant knife light shone in the sky, flashed through the time and space, and left a series of after-images formed by the extremely fast speed. In the brilliant knife light just now, there was a mysterious charm, which was the charm of time that filled the entire time and space. To be precise, it was time acceleration. Charlotte did not understand the sword techniques of the schools in this world, but he knew how to apply the power he mastered to the sword, that is, the power of time. Speed is power, an eternal theory. Using the power of time acceleration to bless himself and apply it to the sword technique, even if Charlotte did not understand any sword technique school, this speed that others could not reach was enough to kill everything, and through this method, his sword would also form a school that belonged to him and was unique. The sword technique that contained the power of time was not something that everyone could master. Time passed unknowingly while Charlotte was practicing his swordsmanship, and during this time, Charlotte's swordsmanship became more and more proficient. Suddenly, Charlotte stopped swinging his sword, and the samurai sword in his hand flashed blue light, turned into bubbles and dissipated in this space. With a slight shake of his mind, Charlotte's consciousness disappeared from the space of time. In the room, Charlotte, who was lying on the bed, opened his eyes, the blue light in his eyes faded, and there was a trace of fatigue between his eyebrows. Outside the window, it was already pitch black, with only a full moon hanging high in the sky and a few stars dotting the night sky. Charlotte sat up from the bed, looked at the situation outside the window, and then looked at the clock hanging on the wall. He calculated in his mind and then said to himself, "Sure enough, I have persisted a little longer than yesterday." Just now in the space of time, Charlotte used his mind to mobilize the long river of time to roll, and the time flow rate he urged was 5 times the maximum time flow rate he could currently achieve. It was only when his mental power was exhausted that he was forcibly kicked out. Although the time he persisted this time was still only slightly longer than yesterday, Charlotte was very satisfied, because according to this growth trend, it would not take long before his mental power would be enough to support his daily consumption of 5 times the flow rate in the time-space, so that he would not be kicked out every time. But by then, after his mental will became stronger, I wonder if he could mobilize a higher flow rate of time. Charlotte did not think too much, and fell directly on the bed. After a while, he fell asleep, because he was really tired at this time. Chapter 7. Charlotte's life in Lulentown was extremely dull. Most of the time he spent traveling back and forth between reality and the space of time. Every time he finished practicing, his time magic would be significantly improved, and his perception of time would become deeper and deeper. Although the speed of this improvement was very slow, it was also rising steadily in an extremely stable form. I believe that with the accumulation of time, there will inevitably be a qualitative change. In this way, another week passed. This day, in the early morning, the red sun rose, and the warm sunlight shone into the room through the window, making the whole room bright. On the bed, Charlotte, who was sleeping soundly, seemed to be affected by the warm sunlight. His eyelids moved slightly, and then he opened his eyes and stretched his body to get up from the bed. 2 hours later, outside Lulentown, Charlotte, dressed in a black robe, came out here, still carrying the long object wrapped in black cloth on his back. This was the first time Charlotte had stepped out of the town in the 2 weeks since he came to Lulentown. His footsteps did not stop at all, and he walked directly to the south of the town. There, from a distance, he could vaguely see a continuous range of mountains. The town of Loren can only be regarded as a medium-sized town in the entire kingdom of Fiori. However, such a medium-sized town is more famous than some big cities. The main reason is that the town of Loren is backed by the Beast King Mountains. The Beast King Mountains are a very famous place in the kingdom of Fiori. There are many powerful monsters in the entire mountain range. These monsters are basically mutated from some animals and beasts. As for the reason for the mutation, it is because these beasts have awakened magic. Just like the difference between human wizards and ordinary humans, there is a huge difference in strength between the beasts that have awakened magic and other ordinary animals and beasts. Such beasts that have awakened magic are collectively called monsters. Most monsters are concentrated in certain specific areas in the kingdom. For example, on the snowy mountain Haybeck Mountain, there is a unique ape monster, Vulcan. It is said that the monster is very perverted and has some special hobbies for human girls. The Beast King Mountains is one of the more famous areas in the kingdom of Fiori where there are many monsters. There are all kinds of monsters in it, and in the deepest part of the mountains, there is a terrifying existence whose strength is comparable to that of an S-level human wizard. For such a mountain full of monsters, ordinary people naturally regard it as a forbidden zone, but for wizards who like adventure and challenge themselves, this is an excellent place for training. In addition, the kingdom often issues some missions to hunt monsters in various areas, and the Beast King Mountains is naturally one of them. It is for this reason that wizards from various wizard guilds can often be seen in the Beast King Mountains. Even in those missions to hunt monsters, there is a mission to hunt the strongest existence in the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains. Beast King. It seems that no wizard has taken up the task of hunting the Beast King since it was released. You should know that the Beast King is comparable to an S-level existence, and in the task of hunting the Beast King, there is not much mention of the strength and means of the Beast King. It is only said that it is a powerful S-level monster, and nothing else. So in this case, even the S-level wizards in the major guilds are unwilling to take risks. It is precisely because of the Beast King Mountains that many wizards from all over the world have gathered in Lulentown, and Charlotte is one of them. He left Lulentown and went to the Beast King Mountains this time because he wanted to test his strength and means. After all, he has been practicing hard behind closed doors for some time. He can clearly feel his strength growing, but for some of his means, he has only simulated them several times in his mind, and has no real combat experience. This time, he entered the Beast King Mountains and planned to use the monsters in it to verify them one by one, and it would be best if he could make some breakthroughs in actual combat. The moment he stepped into the mountains, Charlotte took off the black robe on his head, revealing his handsome face. He looked around at the surrounding environment, and after staying there for a while, he chose a direction and went into a lush jungle. In the jungle, there were thick and round trees standing in a row, and the harmonious green color was everywhere. Charlotte's figure shuttled through the forest. He had been in this jungle for 2 or 3 hours. It was a pity that he only encountered some ordinary beasts along the way, which he solved in 2 or 3 times, and also solved the problem of food and clothing. However, he had never encountered those monsters that had awakened magical mutations in the rumors. At this time, there was a sound of rushing water in front of him, and Charlotte couldn't help but speed up his pace a little, and soon he saw a small stream appear in his field of vision. Charlotte's footsteps suddenly paused, and his eyes narrowed slightly. In front of him, beside the stream, there was a gorgeous tiger sitting on the ground, lowering its head and drinking the stream water. As if hearing the footsteps of Charlotte's arrival, the tiger stopped drinking water, stood up on all fours, turned around, and immediately saw Charlotte, who was watching it. This tiger was a circle larger than the tiger that broke through. There were black stripes on the tiger skin, and 2 sharp fangs were exposed at the tiger's mouth, which looked extremely fierce. The most peculiar thing was that his tiger eyes showed a kind of dark green color. The moment he saw Charlotte, a strong fierce light suddenly emerged in his tiger eyes, and his tiger's mouth opened slightly, making a low whimpering sound. The moment Charlotte saw this tiger, he keenly noticed the difference between the latter and the ordinary beasts he had encountered before. There was a faint wave of magic in the body of this tiger. Obviously, this tiger was exactly what Charlotte was looking for on this trip, a mutant monster that had awakened the innate magic. Thinking of this, a faint burning sensation appeared in his pupils. After searching for so long, he finally found it. This tiger naturally had no way of knowing what Charlotte was thinking. At this moment, the moment it saw Charlotte, it had already defined the latter as food. Roar! Suddenly, with a roar, the tiger stomped its forehooves and flew towards Charlotte. The speed was much faster than those of ordinary tigers. There was a faint sound of wind in the air. Chapter 8. The tiger was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it pounced in front of Charlotte, its mouth wide open, and its sharp fangs seemed to be shining with cold light. However, from beginning to end, the expression on Charlotte's face never changed. He tapped the ground with his toes, and then he jumped up very lightly, jumping onto the trunk of a large tree that two people could hug, overlooking the tiger below that had missed its pounce. When it pounced into the air, the tiger's eyes became even more fierce, staring at Charlotte, who had jumped onto the tree trunk, and it actually jumped up, showing amazing jumping ability, and its speed was no slower than before. But when he pounced in front of Charlotte again, Charlotte's figure flashed again, and the tiger's front paw slammed down, with a crisp sound, and the tree trunk broke in unison, but Charlotte was already standing on the ground again. Then, the tiger landed steadily on the ground. In the following time, the tiger launched a swift attack, but every time it tried to touch Charlotte's body, it would be dodged by Charlotte. This situation lasted for more than 3 minutes. Whoosh! The tiger pounced again. Charlotte stood in place, his eyes were as clear as water, and the tiger's movements were reflected in his pupils. Not only that, what was reflected in his eyes was not only the tiger's current actions, but also the subsequent trajectory of its actions. Predicting the future. In Charlotte's eyes, every action of the tiger had already appeared in his eyes before it started. Even without relying on its swift speed, Charlotte could dodge when the tiger pounced, and he could also judge and give it a fatal blow. Charlotte has been dodging like this, and he is also testing his ability. From the situation he sensed in the past 3 minutes, he can rely on the eye of time to predict the opponent's action trajectory in the next 3 to 5 seconds. Don't underestimate these 3 to 5 seconds. In a duel between real strong men, even 1 second may become a straw that overwhelms the opponent. Moreover, his prediction, combined with his powerful speed, has made him invincible to some extent. Now that this ability has been tested, Charlotte will not let this beast run wild again. Bang! The tiger's body suddenly trembled in the air, and its hair exploded, and then it flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. Charlotte stood in place, with his right fist stretched out, and the blue light on the huge fist slowly dissipated. There was no fluctuation in his eyes when he looked at the tiger, nor was there any joy because he had punched the tiger away. Swish! Charlotte's figure suddenly flashed and turned into a residual image. The tiger that had fallen to the ground was still in a daze, not understanding why he was suddenly knocked away. Then, the familiar feeling came again. The fist flashing with blue light hit him hard at some point. His hair exploded again and his body flew backwards again. This time, even if the tiger's wisdom was not sound, it understood that the food in his eyes was not as simple as it imagined. Roar! The tiger's mouth opened wide and let out a roar that resounded through the jungle. Then, it was seen that the tiger had a faint green magic emerging from its body. Charlotte stopped, looking at the dark green magic power on the tiger, and said to himself, "Are you going to use magic?" The tiger's body, which was already extremely strong, suddenly swelled and expanded again, becoming more attractive. The dark green color of its tiger eyes became deeper. Then, it was seen facing Charlotte, with its mouth suddenly opened wide, and a dark green magic circle condensed in its mouth, and the dark green magic power on its body all gathered towards the magic circle in its mouth. Looking at the series of changes in the tiger, Charlotte's eyes were still indifferent. Boom! Soon, the dark green magic power condensed into a huge ball of light in the tiger's mouth. With the tiger's spit, it turned into a beam of light and whistled towards Charlotte. The beam of light continued to expand in Charlotte's pupils, but facing this beam of light, Charlotte did not choose to dodge or fight back. Because in his prediction, even if he was hit by this beam of light, he would not suffer any serious injuries, and he needed this kind of injury to verify his other idea. The next moment, the speed of light fell on Charlotte's body, and a tingling sensation came from his body, but Charlotte just frowned slightly, and then relaxed again, and the expression on his face remained unchanged, as if the tingling sensation did not appear on his body. However, the pain can be ignored, but the injury caused by the beam of light falling on his body is real, because he did not mobilize the magic power in his body at all, but simply used his body to resist, so there were blood stains on his body, and the blood could not stop flowing. Charlotte naturally noticed the situation on his body, but this was exactly what he needed. He saw his eyes suddenly condensed, and his thoughts triggered the long river of time in the time-space, and the source of time magic in the long river suddenly churned. Charlotte suddenly let out a low shout in his heart, time. Chapter 9. Time. Reverse flow. When Charlotte's voice rang in his heart, the churning of the long river of time in the space of time suddenly stopped, and the blue light-like source of time magic suddenly fluttered twice, and then returned to calm. At the same time, in the outside world, Charlotte's body was faintly brushed with blue fluorescence, and then he saw that his blood was flowing back from the wounds, and the scars on his skin were like pencil writing encountering an eraser. In an instant, they were wiped away one by one, and his skin became extremely white again. This situation is naturally not like receiving healing magic on the surface, but is actually affected by time. Time reverse flow. This ability has been known since Charlotte knew that he could be resurrected because of. Since he acquired this ability, he has never stopped researching and studying this ability. However, unlike time acceleration, even among a series of time abilities, time reversal is of the highest level, and naturally requires a higher level of understanding of time. Through the eye of time, Charlotte began to use the power of time reversal on various things. However, after a series of experiments, Charlotte found that among the things he experimented with, for those objects without life energy, he could easily reverse their time and return them to their original form in an instant. But when he wanted to reverse the time of some living objects, he found that it was difficult to do so. One step is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Although the result of this experiment was somewhat unsatisfactory, Charlotte was not discouraged. Because during the experiment, although the result was somewhat unsatisfactory, he carefully noticed that the creatures whose time he reversed were not completely unchanged, but perhaps because of his current strength and insufficient understanding of time, the changes were too small, so small that he might not be able to detect them without careful observation. What does this mean? It means that this is not impossible, but his current strength is not enough. Just like when he forcibly adjusted the speed of time flow in the space of time, when he used time reversal on living objects, the speed would also disappear. It consumes his mental power, and the amount consumed is even greater. This discovery, far from frustrating him, made him even more excited. You know, as long as the time-space exists, his mental will become stronger and stronger. In other words, when his mental will reaches an extremely powerful level, he will be able to start using this heaven-defying ability. However, I don't know how long I have to wait to reach that step. He is looking forward to that day. I hope this time will not be too long. This ability to reverse the flow of time is still too heaven-defying after all. Perhaps, this is why the magic that blasphemes life in this world is taboo. However, during the experiment, he found a special point. That is, when he applied the power of time reversal to himself, it was not as ineffective as before. As a test subject, he would not be too casual. After all, if something unexpected happened and time reversal occurred, it would be funny to turn him into a child. Of course, the possibility of this happening was very small, but he did not dare to gamble. What he did was to cut a wound on his hand with a knife, and then carefully used the power of time. As a result, he found that he could easily restore the wound, and the mental energy consumed could be said to be negligible. This test result naturally made Charlotte surprised. It seems that as the owner of the Eye of Time, there are some privileges when using the power of time to act on the body. However, he was not too proud, because the wound he cut on his hand with a knife was insignificant, and he was not sure whether it would have such a significant effect if he suffered a bigger injury. So he decided to come to the Beast King Mountains and find an opportunity to verify it in depth. Now he felt that the situation on his body was exactly the same as before he was hit by the light beam, and he couldn't help but feel a little happy in his heart. The experiment was very successful. However, what was a little different from before was that this time there was some consumption of mental power. Although it was not much, it was already a huge amount compared to the negligible amount last time. It seems that the mental power consumed will vary according to the degree of injury on the body. Although the test results were not as perfect as he had imagined, Charlotte was already very satisfied. This ability can definitely become a killer in his hands when facing a powerful enemy in the future. Compared to Charlotte's good mood, the spotted tiger was completely confused. It clearly saw that its magic accurately hit the food and caused considerable damage to the latter. However, in a blink of an eye, before it had time to go up to make up for it, it found that its food suddenly turned back to its original appearance, without any signs of injury on its body. This time, the stupid tiger was completely dumbfounded. Your value has been fully realized, so, Charlotte looked at the stupid tiger standing there coldly, and said indifferently, become my food. The relationship between hunter and prey was reversed. To be precise, from beginning to end, the identities of hunter and prey did not change. It was just that the stupid tiger with low intelligence had a preconceived idea. A dazzling blue light flashed on his right fist. Charlotte's figure flashed, leaving a residual image, and instantly appeared in front of the tiger. His fist was facing up from bottom to top, and he suddenly swung an uppercut and hit the tiger's chin hard. The tiger's eyes bulged, and its two wide-open eyes almost flew out. Then a huge force came, and the whole tiger flew up like a cannonball. Speed is power. Charlotte kicked his feet hard, and his body turned into a residual image again. He appeared above the flying tiger one step ahead, and a blue light flashed on his feet. He aimed at the tiger and stepped down hard. Boom! The huge body of the leopard tiger fell down with a bang. Charlotte gently removed his foot from the former. At this time, the leopard tiger was breathing out more than breathing in. Under Charlotte's punch and kick, it was basically half dead. And from what Charlotte just said, it was inevitable that it would become his food in a while. The miserable little tiger. Chapter 10. After easily getting rid of the tiger, Charlotte did not immediately turn it into food as he said just now, but continued to wander in the jungle. This was the first real battle since he awakened the Eye of Time. Although the opponent was not strong, it also allowed him to verify some of his methods. However, this is far from enough. He needs more opponents, or stronger opponents to hone himself. However, although he only experienced one battle, he has already fallen in love with the Beast King mountain range. It is worthy of being a place loved by those wizards who are keen on adventure. This is just in the periphery, and he can encounter such a monster. I believe that if he goes deeper, the opponents inside will make him more satisfied. In fact, Charlotte has already had some interest in the overlord of the Beast King mountain range, the Beast King in the deepest part of the mountain range. He must go to see it if he has a chance. Of course, this time is not now. After all, he is famous. He is not sure whether his current strength can escape unscathed when facing the Beast King with S-level strength. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, it has been half a year since Charlotte came to Lulentown. In the past 6 months, Charlotte has frequently traveled between the Beast King Mountains and Lulentown, enjoying it. The combination of continuous actual combat training and meditation in the time and space has made Charlotte's strength grow at an extremely terrifying speed. In a tavern in the center of Lulentown, Charlotte sat alone in the corner of the tavern, holding a glass of rich red wine in his hand, drinking alone. I don't know when Charlotte began to like the feeling of drinking alone. However, he came to the tavern not only because he enjoyed this feeling, but also because the tavern was the easiest place to attract people from all over the world to gather, and it was also the most convenient place to collect gossip. Unlike the information in the Magic Weekly, in the tavern, you may hear any news, including some intelligence from the Dark Guild. In the tavern, the voices were noisy, and from time to time, a few eyes would fall on Charlotte, but they would immediately shift away. It was not only because Charlotte was wearing a black robe and drinking alone that attracted too much attention. Another reason was that in the past 6 months, many wizards from all over the world had met Charlotte in the Beast King Mountains many times. And several times, Charlotte was seen walking out of the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains. You know, the monsters that appeared there were all extremely powerful monsters. Over time, the news that Charlotte was very likely to be a powerful wizard spread quietly in Lulentown. Moreover, the characteristics of Charlotte's black robe were so unique that it attracted the attention of many people. It was just because Charlotte never took the initiative to talk to people, and there was always a vague aura of indifference on his body, that kind of feeling of strangers not coming in, so those who were curious about him directly cut off the idea of contacting Charlotte. After a while, Charlotte drank the red wine in the glass in one gulp, put down the glass, got up and left. At this time, at the door of the tavern, a group of 2 women and 1 man were walking into the tavern. The 3 of them all had silver white hair. The leader was a girl dressed like a little girl. She had a pretty face and a slightly raised mouth, as if she was born with pride and confidence. Her long silver white hair was tied into a ponytail and fell on her slender waist. Her figure was even more curvy and easily attracted people's attention. The other girl had short hair and looked sweet and lovely. Her big eyes were full of spirit and she always had a sweet smile on her lips. Her cute look gave people a strong desire to protect her. As for the only man among the 3, he was strong and had a rough face. He was taller than the two girls, but his eyebrows always revealed a look of lack of confidence, which was very different from the first girl. When the three entered the tavern, Charlotte just walked out. The sweet-looking short-haired girl stood on the far left. When she saw Charlotte coming out, she moved to the right very well and made room for him. Charlotte subconsciously glanced at the short-haired girl, because the short-haired girl was shorter than Charlotte, and when Charlotte looked over, she could see through the wide black robe and meet his gaze. The short-haired girl blinked, and then showed a sweet smile on her face. Perhaps because the former's smile was too innocent, Charlotte paused, then nodded slightly, and then left the tavern. The short-haired girl looked at Charlotte's back as he left, tilted her head, blinked her smart eyes, and didn't know what she was thinking. "Listen, what's wrong with you?" Seeing her sister suddenly stop, Myra Jane, the girl dressed as a little gangster, turned her head and looked at him with a questioning look in her eyes. "Nothing." When asked by her sister, the short-haired girl Lysina shook her head, then suddenly smiled and said, "Sister, that boy just now was so handsome." "Handsome?" Myra Jane was stunned, then looked away, but Charlotte's figure was already submerged in the crowd on the street. She retracted her gaze and said, "I didn't see his appearance clearly just now." As she said this, Myra Jane thought silently in her heart, "But that person just now, there was a strange aura on his body, but what is that? I didn't see it clearly either." At this time, Elfman, the only boy among the three, said, "However, a man should rely on strength, being handsome is useless." As he said that, he waved his arms, as if he wanted to show off his hard muscles. On the side, Lysina covered her mouth and laughed while watching her brother's muscle show. "Let's go in first," Myra Jane said. Lysina and Elfman nodded, and the three of them walked in together. Chapter 11. As Charlotte was walking on the street, he couldn't help but think of the three people he had just met at the door of the tavern. Among the three, the sweet smile of the short-haired girl flashed through his mind first, and then the figure of the girl dressed as a little gangster appeared in his mind. The same hair color, and the three of them have the same magical aura in their bodies. They should have awakened the same type of magic. It seems that the three of them are siblings. However, although Charlotte felt the magic fluctuations in the bodies of the three people, the one who really made him care a little bit was only the girl dressed as a little gangster, because the magic fluctuations in this person's body were much stronger than the other two. It can even be said that she was the most powerful magician he had met so far. But the specific strength of this person can only be known after seeing her take action with his own eyes. At this age, silver hair color. Charlotte's eyes flickered slightly, and he couldn't help but think of an issue of Magic Weekly he had read, which described a magic genius who looked very similar to this person. However, that issue of Magic Weekly didn't include that person's photo, so he couldn't verify his guess. But Charlotte didn't care about it. He was not a gossipy person. He was just a little curious about the man's strength. As he was thinking, Charlotte had already walked out of Lulentown, and the direction he was heading was still the Beast King Mountains. Deep in the Beast King Mountains. Woohoo! A loud scream came from the mountains. A huge blue wolf, more than 3 times larger than an ordinary wolf, stared at the black-robed boy in front of it with fierce eyes. What was even more bizarre was that on the surface of this giant blue wolf, there was a flash of extremely violent purple lightning. It was obviously another mutant monster. The black-robed boy was Charlotte. There was a cold look in his eyes. He held the knife in one hand. The knife was not out of the body. The scabbard was black and simple. This knife was the ultimate knife, Red Lotus Tianwu. This giant blue wolf must have been in a state of being angered by Charlotte. The purple lightning on its body seemed to be extremely violent, making a crackling sound. At this time, there was an arc jumping in the blue wolf's pupils. The purple lightning on its body seemed to be pulled and suddenly surged. Then suddenly, all the purple lightning on its body broke out of its body at this moment and turned into a dazzling electric light. The lightning streaked through the void, and in the form of thunder and lightning, it transformed into a wolf in the air, and raged towards Charlotte. Charlotte's eyes reflected the lightning, and then his figure suddenly flashed, leaving a residual image on the spot. Instant slash! With a low shout, Charlotte's figure rushed towards the wolf formed by lightning like a phantom. Almost at the same time, a brilliant knife light flashed in the sky, and with a tearing sound, it seemed that even the void was about to be torn apart by it. Then, it was seen that the wolf-shaped lightning suddenly stopped in the sky, and the arcs jumping on its body also came to an abrupt end, and then disappeared. Under Charlotte's slash that reached the speed limit, even the lightning known for its violentness among the elements could not escape and return to nothingness. After the slash, Charlotte's figure did not stop. The brilliant sword light did not slow down. Under the terrified gaze of the giant blue wolf, the sword light slashed down and directly killed it on the spot. Even until its death, the giant blue wolf did not see the traces of Charlotte's attack, because the speed of the attack was too fast. With a rustling sound, Charlotte made a move with one hand, and a piece of black cloth appeared in his hand. He rolled it casually and completely wrapped the sword in it, and then carried it on his back. After doing this series of actions, he looked at his prey, and then whispered, "Let's eat wolf meat tonight." The night covered the earth, with only a faint moonlight pouring down, providing the only light for the entire Beast King Mountains. Deep in the mountains, in an area, there was a faint fire. As the picture moved closer, you could see a bonfire burning on the ground. On the bonfire, there was a skewer of barbecue. Under the scorching flames, the surface of the barbecued meat showed an attractive golden color, and the aroma was overflowing. As long as you smelled it, you would unconsciously salivate and your appetite would increase. Under a big tree nearby, Charlotte sat on the ground, leaning against the tree, with his eyes closed. Beside him, there were a lot of broken bones, obviously he had just had a full meal. Rustle. At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps on fallen leaves from one side. Hearing the movement, Charlotte's eyes suddenly opened. Although he was taking a nap, his mental state had always been in a high state of alert. After all, this was deep in the Beast King Mountains, and one could never say when one or two monsters would pop up. This kind of thing was not something he had never encountered in the past 6 months. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. Charlotte looked to one side. However, the monster he imagined did not appear. Instead, 3 figures emerged from the darkness. Through the light of the campfire, the appearance of the 3 people caught Charlotte's eye. Is it them? A strange color flashed in Charlotte's eyes. These 3 people were the white-haired trio he had met at the entrance of the tavern before. It smells so good. A crisp voice sounded, and the short-haired girl Lysina looked at the barbecue on the bonfire with shining eyes, her cute little nose twitched, her face full of greed. Elfman beside him swallowed his saliva and almost drooled. As for Myra Jane, although he performed better than the other 2, his eyes also glanced at the golden barbecue from time to time. Obviously, the 3 of them were attracted by the aroma of the barbecue. "Hey, it's you." Fortunately, although the 3 of them were salivating over the barbecue, they did not ignore Charlotte, the owner of the barbecue. When Lysina saw Charlotte's face clearly, she exclaimed, "What a coincidence." Charlotte did not use a black robe to cover his face at this time, so Lysina, who happened to see Charlotte at the entrance of the tavern, immediately recognized her. Chapter 12. After hearing Lysina's exclamation, Myra Jane and Elfman also recognized Charlotte. Although they had never seen Charlotte's face like Lysina, they still had some impression of her black robe. "He's really handsome." Myra Jane remembered that Lysina had said that Charlotte was handsome. She didn't take it too seriously at the time. But now that she had seen his true face, she found that Charlotte was really handsome, much more handsome than those guys in her guild, especially his eyes, which were as deep as the starry sky. One look at them would easily make people fall in love with him and couldn't help wanting to take a second look. Moreover, there was a special temperament that was hard to explain in Charlotte. This temperament was like the finishing touch, adding a sense of transcendence to the handsome Charlotte. Although he always had a cold face, he made people like him at first sight. Although Myra Jane was not the kind of fangirl who couldn't walk when seeing a handsome guy, she had a good first impression of Charlotte because of this. Of course, it would be even better if she didn't have a cold face. When Charlotte saw that the people who appeared were not monsters, he relaxed his vigilance a little. Although he was a little surprised to meet these 3 people here, he was not surprised. In the 6 months he stayed in Lulentown, he had never met these 3 people. Obviously, these 3 people had just come from other parts of the kingdom. As for the reason for coming here, it was obviously because of the Beast King Mountains. It's just that he didn't expect that these 3 people would come to such a deep place in the Beast King Mountains. It seems that they are also very confident in their own strength. Thinking of this, his eyes couldn't help but glance at Myra Jane, the strongest of the 3. That. Perhaps because Charlotte was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament, Lysina did not feel restrained because they were strangers. With a sweet smile on her face, she walked up to him and said, "Your barbecue smells so good." We haven't eaten for a long time since we came here. Can you give us some? She stared at Charlotte with wide eyes and a pitiful look, expectantly. In response, Charlotte just said lightly, "Whatever you want." "Thank you so much." Although Charlotte's tone was very flat, Lysina still expressed her sincere gratitude. Upon seeing this, Myra Jane and Elfman also thanked Charlotte, then quickly walked to the campfire and began to eat without hesitation. The way they wolfed down their food showed that they were really hungry. Lysina, on the other hand, ate slowly and carefully, still maintaining a bit of a ladylike image. As for Myra Jane, judging by her little gangster look, she probably didn't care about the so-called ladylike image. Charlotte leaned against the tree, just watching the three of them quietly. But at this moment, his eyes suddenly focused, and his sight fell on Lysina's smooth left arm, where a red emblem was engraved. Charlotte was not unfamiliar with the appearance of the emblem, because he had seen it countless times in Magic Weekly. It was from that guild. Lysina also noticed Charlotte's gaze at this time, stopped eating, and asked in confusion, "Hey? What's the matter?" "No." Charlotte looked away and shook her head. Lysina said oh after hearing this. Although she was still a little confused, she didn't ask any more questions. After a moment's silence, Charlotte suddenly asked, "Are you fairy tale wizards?" The emblem engraved on Lysina's left arm was the emblem of the Wizard Guild Fairy Tale. "Yes." Lysina smiled and nodded. She glanced at the emblem on her left arm and knew what Charlotte was looking at. "I am Lysina, the Wizard of Fairy Tale, this is Sister Myra, this is Brother Elfman, we are all wizards of fairy tale." As Lysina said this, the smile on her face became more and more intense, and it was obvious that she was very proud of being a wizard of fairy tale. "Big brother, what about you?" Lysina asked Charlotte. Myra Jane and Elfman also looked at Charlotte. It was obvious that they both had a certain interest in Charlotte. After all, if he appeared here, it meant that Charlotte must be a strong wizard. Charlotte, said calmly, "Wandering wizard." Hearing Charlotte's brief introduction, the three nodded gently. They were not too surprised that Charlotte was a wandering wizard. In this world, although most wizards choose to join the Wizard Guild, there are still many wizards who have no affiliation, and these wizards are collectively called wandering wizards. In fact, in Myra's opinion, it is more reasonable for Charlotte to be a wandering wizard. After all, if Charlotte is a member of a regular guild, then according to the latter's appearance, he can definitely be ranked at the top of the want to be a boyfriend ranking in the Wizard Weekly, or even the top of the list. After all, his appearance and temperament are here. "Then I'll call you Brother Charlotte." Lysina smiled sweetly. That sweet smile and clear voice made Charlotte unable to refuse. Seeing Charlotte didn't say anything, Lysina took it for granted that this was the former's acquiescence, and she happily called him Brother Charlotte, which made Charlotte speechless. This girl, that's too simplistic. At this time, Myra Jane beside him had almost finished eating. She threw a piece of leftover bone aside, then looked at Charlotte and said, "Thank you for the treat. Although Lysina has already said it, I still feel the need to introduce myself." "Mirage," said, "My name is Mirage, and I'm a wizard of fairy tale." Charlotte narrowed her eyes, met Mirage's gaze, and whispered, "I know. I still know fairy tale's S-class wizard, the famous demon Myra Jane." Chapter 13. I know fairy tale's S-class wizard, the famous demon Myra Jane. After Charlotte finished speaking, Myra Jane was stunned at first, then the corners of her mouth slightly raised, with a hint of pride on her face, she said, "I didn't expect that my reputation has become so high." Although Myra has never cared much about fame, she was still a little proud to see that every unknown wandering wizard she met in the Beast King Mountains knew her name. The reason why Charlotte knew this was naturally because of the Magic Weekly. One of the most talented wizards he learned about in the Magic Weekly was Myra Jane in front of him, who was known as the Demon. In 781, which was last year, he became an S-class wizard at the age of 16. The time he took to become an S-class wizard was second only to another magic genius in the same guild. But just when Myra was feeling proud, Charlotte said again, "Compared to the demon Myra Jane, I am more interested in the fairy queen of your guild." "It's over." When Charlotte said the word fairy queen, Lysina and Elfman knew that something serious was going to happen, and they shuddered subconsciously. The two slowly moved their eyes and looked at Myra Jane beside them. Sure enough, they saw that the corners of the latter's slightly raised lips twitched twice, and a layer of black air seemed to be shrouded in her body, and her face became slightly gloomy. She looked straight at Charlotte, gritted her teeth, and spoke word by word, "You just said that you are more interested in the Fairy Queen. Everyone in fairy tale knows that in the guild, Myra Jane and Fairy Queen Urza are the two people who are most incompatible, and they will compete with each other no matter what." If Charlotte just mentioned the Fairy Queen casually, it would be nothing, but Charlotte's original words were more interested in the Fairy Queen. Could she understand this sentence as Charlotte's interest in Urza surpassing hers? Even though Charlotte was just a stranger she had just met, for Myra Jane, who wanted to compete with Urza in everything, anything that could compete with Urza was a big deal. However, Charlotte didn't know the twists and turns. Although he didn't understand why Myra Jane suddenly became a different person, he still replied, "Is there anything wrong with what I said?" After that, he continued, "I'm just curious about how the Fairy Queen who became an S-class wizard a year earlier than you would be. It's over." As soon as these words came out, Lysina and Elfman's faces changed. This time, things really got serious. As expected, after hearing Charlotte's words, Myra Jane was about to turn black. She held back the anger that was about to erupt in her heart, and said through gritted teeth, "That was just her good luck. If I hadn't accidentally lost my way that time, I would definitely have become an S-class wizard first. Sometimes, luck is also a part of strength." Charlotte said lightly, "This is just an excuse you made up. You guy." Charlotte's words and his annoying tone directly made Myra angry. The good first impression that Charlotte had originally created because of his handsome appearance and his transcendent temperament instantly collapsed at this moment. This guy was so annoying that he even said so frequently that she was not as good as Urza. Marajana's full breasts rose and fell slightly, and it was obvious that she was angry. She took a deep breath and forced herself to resist the urge to transform into a demon and teach Charlotte a lesson. She snorted coldly, "For the sake of the barbecue, I won't bother with you this time." After that, she turned around and didn't want to look at Charlotte again, even though the latter was handsome. Seeing this, Lysina and Elfman both breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that things were not as bad as they imagined. Sister Myra was still somewhat rational. But at this moment, Charlotte whispered again, "What a sick woman." Although the voice was very soft, it was still heard by Myra Jane at the distance between them. Even Lysina and Elfman heard it clearly. The two of them were immediately relieved. Marajana's body, which had just turned around, suddenly stiffened. There was even a solid black gas floating above her head. It seemed that there was a volcano hidden in her petite body, and it was about to erupt. "Hey, Sister Myra." Seeing that her sister seemed to be about to go berserk, Lysina quickly ran up and took her arm, "Sister Myra, it's getting late, how about we go to bed early? I'm sleepy." Holding Myra's arm, Lysina saw her sister lowering her head and seemed to be whispering something. She moved her head closer and immediately heard a voice, "Barbecue. Barbecue. Barbecue." Lysina immediately realized that her sister was using this delicious barbecue to comfort her, and she once again suppressed the urge to beat Charlotte up. "That." Charlotte spoke again, but as soon as he said that, Lysina turned her head and looked at Charlotte with tearful eyes, saying pitifully, "Brother Charlotte, please stop talking, okay?" Charlotte was stunned, but still said, "I just want to say that this is deep in the Beast King Mountains, and monsters often appear at night, so be careful when you rest." "We understand, thank you, Brother Charlotte." Hearing that Charlotte did not continue to say something to provoke Myra, Lysina's heart suddenly relaxed, and then she showed that familiar sweet smile and smiled sweetly at Charlotte. Chapter 14. After Lysina finished speaking, she pulled Myra Jane to the other side of the campfire to rest. While walking, Myra Jane looked at Charlotte with a grim look on her face. Elfman saw this and walked over, but before leaving, he couldn't help but look at Charlotte with admiration. He was full of admiration. He dared to talk to Sister Myra like this, and he didn't get beaten. He was a real man. After Charlotte reminded him, he closed his eyes and continued to take a nap. Of course, he still maintained a certain vigilance to prevent the appearance of monsters. Since the tragedy in Hulu village, he has always been a person who doesn't like to talk. This time, because he encountered a topic of interest, he said a few more words. These few words may be the most he has spoken in the past 6 months. However, he just mentioned the Fairy Queen, and Myra Jane became inexplicably confused. The originally pleasant chat became stiff in an instant. There must be something he didn't know. He didn't want to ask about these things. He had no interest in doing things that would only make him feel uncomfortable. So, the first exchange between the few people ended hastily in such an awkward atmosphere. The next day. The night passed, the sky gradually brightened, the red sun rose, and the warm sunlight shone into the Beast King Mountains. Fortunately, there were no sudden monster attacks that night, so the few people rested well and woke up refreshed. "Good morning, Brother Charlotte." After Lysina woke up, she saw Charlotte, who had woken up early, with sleepy eyes, and immediately smiled and greeted him. "Good morning." Charlotte also replied. "Humph." A cold snort came from the side, and Myra's eyes looking at Charlotte were still a little unfriendly. Obviously she was still angry about what happened last night. But Charlotte was who he was, and he didn't care about Myra's gaze at all. He stood aside calmly and didn't even look at the latter. This careless attitude made Myra angry again, and she immediately said, "Lysina, Elfman, let's go, we are here with a mission." Then she strode into the depths of the mountains, not wanting to stay with Charlotte for a moment. "Oh." Lysina nodded, looked at Charlotte apologetically, and followed. Elfman awkwardly turned his head, said good morning to Charlotte, and immediately followed the two. Charlotte looked at the direction the three were going, frowning slightly. He was already in the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains, and the three were going deeper into the mountains. There would be the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains, and it was also the location of the most powerful existence in the Beast King Mountains. At this moment, Charlotte vaguely guessed what the mission of the three was. "Your mission is to defeat the Beast King," Charlotte suddenly shouted to the three people. Hearing the voice coming from behind, Myra's footsteps paused slightly, but she did not turn around, just snorted coldly from a distance, "It's none of your business." Although there was no clear answer to Charlotte, Charlotte already had a bottom line in his heart. These three people actually came for the Beast King. Thinking of spending a night with these three people, although it was not very pleasant, Charlotte still planned to remind the three people and shouted, "The Beast King is not so easy to deal with. He is completely different from other monsters in the mountains. If you are not careful." 4 big words came out of Charlotte's mouth. "It will kill people." Although Charlotte had never fought with the Beast King, in the second half of the year, whenever he came to the Beast King Mountains, he spent most of his time in the deeper parts of the mountains. Although he had never reached the deepest place, he had seen the style of the Beast King many times. Apart from other things, its huge body, like a small mountain, was far beyond the reach of other monsters in the mountains, not to mention the terrifying aura that naturally emanated. When Charlotte saw it for the first time, he was secretly shocked. Charlotte could be sure that the strength of the Beast King was definitely higher than the rumors. Half a year ago, when Charlotte first entered the Beast King Mountains, he had an idea about the Beast King, but at that time, due to his strength, he did not take action. Now that half a year has passed, his strength has changed dramatically compared to half a year ago. With this change in strength, his idea of the Beast King naturally became stronger. He asked himself, even if he was defeated by the Beast King, he would be able to retreat unscathed and protect himself after the fight, and he would be able to if we use all our strength, it is possible to defeat it. In this case, the reason why Charlotte has not taken action yet is that he has made great progress in his understanding of time in recent times and is thinking about a very special time magic. Now, this magic has already taken shape in his mind, and according to his understanding of time, the probability of this magic taking shape is as high as 90%, and the remaining 10% may be due to his lack of mental will. In other words, Charlotte has almost absolute confidence in this magic. His original idea was to officially take action against the Beast King after thoroughly developing this magic, and he was confident that as long as this magic was performed, the uncertainty he had originally faced when fighting the Beast King would completely disappear, and he would win. However, plans always cannot keep up with changes. He did not expect that when he was preparing to deal with the Beast King, someone had already taken action first, and it was the Wizard of Fairy Tale that he was very interested in. Chapter 15. Charlotte's words of admonishment to the three were not because they had robbed his prey, but out of kindness. Just as the three had a good first impression of him, his impression of them was also not bad. Of course, this good impression might be largely due to Lysina, a girl with a simple mind and a sweet smile. Myra was able to become an S-class wizard at the age of 16, so Charlotte naturally would not doubt her strength. However, the Beast King was not so easy to deal with. Myra had been an S-class wizard for too short a time, and it was very unknown whether she could be the opponent of the Beast King. Moreover, Myra brought 2 burdens with her this time. The word burden might sound a bit harsh, but according to Charlotte's exploration of the fluctuations of magic power in the 2 people, their strength was not small compared to Myra. When fighting against the Beast King, who was also S-class, it was no exaggeration to say that the 2 were burdens. After all, in some battles, more people is not necessarily better. It may be just a small accident, and it may make them regret for life. On the other side, when Charlotte said the heavy words "people will die," Myra Jane suddenly turned around, stared at Charlotte from a distance, and said coldly, "I said, this is our own business, you don't have to meddle in it." However, perhaps thinking that Charlotte was also worried about their safety, her next voice became slightly softer, "Besides, my strength is beyond your comprehension." When Myra said this, a hint of pride appeared on her pretty face again. This pride naturally came from her confidence in her own strength. However, when Charlotte saw this confidence, he didn't know whether it was confidence or arrogance. After Myra finished speaking, she turned around and continued to walk to the deepest part of the mountain. Lysina and Elfman still followed her unwaveringly. Even when they thought about facing the most powerful Beast King in this mountain range, they did not show any fear on their faces, because they all had complete trust in this sister who had depended on them since childhood. Looking at the figures of the 3 people disappearing in the depths of the mountain from a distance, Charlotte retracted his gaze and whispered, "I hope your strength is really as you said, otherwise arrogance will pay a price." After saying that, Charlotte left the place. He had already reminded them once, and if someone didn't listen to his advice, it was none of his business. Half a day later, in the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains, a thunderous roar resounded from the deepest part of the mountains. For a long time, the deepest part of the Beast King Mountains, whether it is human wizards or other monsters in the mountains, will not set foot here. Because this is where the most powerful existence in the entire mountain range, the Beast King, stays. His strength that is unrivaled in the entire Beast King Mountains makes him the unique king here. However, today, someone actually appeared here and attacked the king. Roar! Another thunderous roar sounded, and along with this roar, there was also a low and delicate cry. "Receive with the whole body, the soul of Satan." A black light emerged, and Marajana's pretty figure suddenly changed, transforming into the body of Satan. Her white hair was flying, her figure was graceful, and behind her was a pair of black wings like bat wings stretched out. Powerful and violent magic power emanated from her body, and compared with the original Myra Jane, she looked even wilder and more violent. This is the receiving magic used, the demon Myra Jane who received the soul of Satan. Feeling the explosive power in her body, the confidence and pride on the demon Myra's face became more prominent, and her mind couldn't help but ring with what Charlotte had said before, and then she chuckled and said to herself, "Soon you'll know that my strength is not what you can imagine." After saying that, she raised her eyes and looked at the huge figure that was like a small mountain. Feeling the powerful magic fluctuations transmitted from it, she was not afraid at all. There was a burning fighting spirit in her eyes. The whole person turned into a black light and rushed towards the behemoth. This behemoth was the most powerful existence in the Beast King mountain range, the Beast King. Its eyes flashed with a strange purple light. Because of its huge body, every step it took would cause the earth to tremble. In comparison, Mileage's demon body was as small as an ant in front of it. Of course, this was just a comparison of size. In terms of magic power, the magic fluctuations emitted by Mila's demon body were not much weaker than its dark raging stream. Soon, the demon Myra came to the Beast King, leaped up, and appeared in the sky like lightning. He looked at the Beast King with a low shout, and dark energy emerged from his hands, turning into whip claws and flying towards the Beast King. The Beast King also had a huge amount of magic power emerging from him. He just waved his huge arms and smashed all the black whip claws one by one. However, there was no fluctuation on the face of the demon Myra, but a more violent magic power roared wildly. The black wings behind him, like bat wings, kept shaking. The speed of the demon Myra suddenly increased, and the whole person was wrapped in a huge ball of black energy, and he directly hit the body of the Beast King. Bang! A loud noise resounding through the world rose up, and an astonishing airwave spread out in all directions. In an instant, billowing smoke and dust rose up. The battle between the demon Myra and the Beast King also officially kicked off. Chapter 16. Such a strong vibration from the depths of the Beast King Mountains attracted the attention of countless monsters in the Beast King Mountains. When they heard the earth-shaking roar coming from it, they all showed a trace of fear in their eyes, obviously recognizing the owner of the roar. In the following time, the vibration in the depths of the mountains not only did not disappear but intensified, and the roar of the Beast King sounded more frequently, scaring the monsters who felt the movement to fall to the ground. Not only the monsters in the mountains, but also some magicians who were training in the Beast King Mountains at this time also felt the huge movement in the depths of the mountains. The movement was so strong, and it came from the depths of the mountains. Many magicians guessed some of the truth, and then became more shocked. Someone actually made a move on the Beast King. After the shock, their eyes became hot. To be able to make a move on the Beast King, it is obvious that the person who made the move must be an S-level magician. Every S-level magician on the continent is the object of worship and yearning for countless magicians. Although they wanted to witness the battle scene of the S-class existence, they did not dare to set foot in the depths of the mountains. Not to mention that there were many powerful monsters in the depths of the mountains, the aftermath of the battle between the S-class wizard and the Beast King alone might not be something they could bear. If they were affected, it would be troublesome. Therefore, although they guessed what happened in the depths of the mountains, no wizard rushed there. At this time, there was only one person in the depths of the mountains, and that was Charlotte. Has it started? Not far from the deepest part of the mountain, Charlotte stopped and looked in that direction after feeling the huge movement coming from it. The vibration in the deepest part of the mountain lasted for half an hour before it weakened a little. Super cruel flash! On a broken rock, the demon Myra shouted loudly, an infinite dark energy condensed on his hands. It seemed that it was filled with all the darkness and evil in the world. A terrifying wave of destruction continued to emanate from it. That's it, Beast King. The demon Myra looked at the huge Beast King, a black light flashed in her eyes, and her feet suddenly slammed, and the rocks under her feet shattered completely with a bang. Then she rushed up, with her hands full of destructive dark energy, aimed at the chest of the Beast King, and pressed down fiercely. The dark energy full of destruction passed through the hands of the demon Myra, like black lightning, and began to surge to the whole body of the Beast King, raging wildly on his body. The black lightning formed by the dark energy invaded his whole body, and the Beast King's body suddenly shook wildly like crazy. With his huge arms holding his head, he let out miserable roars. Seeing this, the corners of Demon Myra's mouth suddenly curved slightly. The miserable roars continued for a long time, and lasted for half a minute before stopping. At this time, the huge body of the Beast King, which was like a hill, was covered with scars destroyed by the dark energy. The purple light in his eyes also became dim, and his body was even more shaky. He looked like he was dying, as if he could be easily defeated by a random blow. Sister Myra, that's great! Not far away, Elfman shouted while running towards this side with a happy look on his face. Myra Jane turned her head to look at her brother, and a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. She gave him a thumbs up, and still had that proud look on her face. She said to herself, the Beast King is just so-so. Then she thought of Charlotte's words to dissuade her, and the arc of her mouth suddenly turned up a little higher, but then her eyes flashed, and she looked puzzled. In her eyes, the joy on the face of her brother Elfman who was running here disappeared at some point, and was replaced by a panic. For some reason, her heart suddenly became a little flustered at this moment. Sister Myra, be careful! Elfman's shout reached her ears, and she was stunned for a moment, and then her face changed drastically. How could it be? The Beast King, who was originally on the verge of death, saw the purple light in his huge pupils light up again, and his huge arm swung down violently, blowing a strong gust of wind, and swung it towards Mylaja. Damn it! In panic, Myra Jane could only use all her magic power and crossed her arms in front of her. Bang! The giant arm swung down, and Myra flew backwards, hitting a huge rock behind her. Under the impact of this huge force, cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of the rock. Myra fell to the ground, and a black light flashed on her body. The demon body of Satan disappeared and turned back into the appearance of a little girl. Although her appearance had changed, her eyes were still filled with fear and confusion. Obviously I have won. Roar! The Beast King roared to the sky, the sound waves rolled, and there were faint ripples in the air. In this ferocious state, there was no trace of the weakness just now. Seeing this, Myra gritted her teeth and understood in her heart that this Beast King had done it on purpose just now. She was too careless. Myra secretly hated it. She was happy too early and relaxed her guard. She didn't expect that this Beast King would actually cheat. She punched the ground with an ugly face. It was because of her carelessness that she was forced into a desperate situation. Chapter 17. The Beast King's huge body kept approaching Myra. Every step taken by that huge body would make a loud bang sound on the ground. As the Beast King approached, Myra's heart gradually sank. For the first time in her life, she felt despair. At this moment, after enduring the last blow from the Beast King, her magic power had been completely consumed. She was unable to receive the soul of Satan. Moreover, with her current physical condition, even if she could receive the transformation, she would not be the opponent of the Beast King. Myra only felt a darkening in front of her eyes, and the figure of the Beast King had already arrived in front of her. "Are you going to die here?" Myra looked at the Beast King in despair. At this moment, the latter's strong arms were already raised high. She could not think of any other outcome except death. "Don't touch Sister Myra!" A black shadow suddenly flashed by and appeared between the Beast King and Myra, with arms open, looking up and glaring at the Beast King. Elfman. Seeing the appearance of the person, Myra was stunned at first, then her face changed drastically, and she shouted anxiously, "Elfman, what are you doing here? Go away!" "No." Elfman turned his head and looked at Myra, his tone was particularly firm. "Elfman." Myra stared at Elfman in disbelief. Was this still the brother who always obeyed her? From childhood to adulthood, in her impression, Elfman was the kind of person who was not firm enough, even a little cowardly, which was completely inconsistent with his strong and tall figure. However, at this moment, Elfman's rough face was filled with a strong stubbornness, and his eyes were even more determined than ever. Such a huge change before and after. "Is it because you want to protect her as your sister?" At this time, Elfman's voice slowly sounded and reached Myra's ears one by one. "From childhood to adulthood, it has always been Sister Myra who protected Lysina and me. No matter what difficulties we encountered, she would rush to the front alone to prevent Lysina and me from getting hurt. This time was no exception, but Sister Myra has fallen, so this time, it's my turn to protect you, Sister Myra. A man should protect his sister." Elfman roared at the end, his voice rolling like thunder, echoing through the depths of the mountains. Not far from here, on a cliff, Lysina was alone. Before Myra Jane attacked the Beast King, she was worried that her weakest sister would be affected, so she asked her to wait here first. A man should protect his sister. Elfman's voice was like thunder, with a little echo, and it also reached here. Elfman's brother, Lysina's cute little face was filled with deep worry, and then her eyes fixed. A blue magic circle appeared under her feet, and she turned into a blue bird, flapping her wings and flying inside. At the same time, Charlotte, who was also in the depths of the mountains, also looked in that direction. He could always feel the movement of the two powerful magic forces colliding from inside, but just now, the two powerful magic forces changed in an instant. First, one of the magic forces disappeared, and then suddenly returned, and then the other powerful magic force disappeared. Only one of the two powerful magic forces remained. Feeling the disappearance of the powerful magic force with a familiar breath, Charlotte seemed to have guessed the outcome. He said softly, "Idiot woman." After that, he turned around and walked in the opposite direction, but when he took a step, his steps stopped again. A sweet and lovely face appeared in his mind, and the crisp shout seemed to reappear in his ears. "Oh, forget it, I can't call you brother for nothing." Charlotte whispered to herself, then turned around and walked towards the source of the sound. "Thank you for having a good sister, idiot woman." On the other side, the huge fist of the Beast King had already smashed down quickly. However, Elfman below didn't seem to see it at all. There was only a flash of determination in his eyes, and he roared suddenly, "Receive!" As soon as the voice fell, all the magic power in his body burst out at this moment. Under his feet, a dark brown magic circle shone with light, completely covering him. At the same time, a ray of light leaped out from the magic circle under his feet and attacked the Beast King who was swinging his fist. The next moment, the light fell on the Beast King, and suddenly a magic circle exactly the same as the magic circle under Elfman's feet emerged. At the same time as the magic circle was formed, the Beast King's swinging fist suddenly stopped at this moment, saving the two people below from being killed by this fist. But seeing this situation, there was no joy on Mirajana's face, but she turned pale. As a wizard who receives magic, she certainly knew what Elfman did. "Elfman, no!" Tears welled up in Mirajana's eyes, and her voice was slightly hoarse, "You are not strong enough. If you force it, you will be attacked back. Elfman seemed to be deaf to Marajana's shouts, and still used the receiving magic forcefully. Of course, he knew the risks of doing so, but facing the Beast King whose strength far exceeded his, he could not think of a second way to stop it except this method. Although he knew that the success rate of doing so was less than 1%, in order to protect his sister, he still resolutely chose to do so. Receive it with your whole body, Beast King. Elfman's eyes were bloodshot, and waves of severe pain surged through his body. He gritted his teeth and shouted. In an instant, the two magic circles flashed with dazzling light at the same time, and the Beast King's body suddenly turned into a beast soul and escaped into Elfman's body. After receiving the Beast King's soul, Elfman's body suddenly swelled and rose up, turning into the appearance of the Beast King. He also roared to the sky. In that roar, the voices of Elfman and the Beast King seemed to overlap and resounded in the sky. Chapter 18. Elfman, who had transformed into the Beast King, kept making those two overlapping roars. From the sound, it was impossible to tell whether this huge creature was Elfman or Beastmaster. Elfman. Myra forced herself to support her extremely weak body and walked to the open space beside her. She raised her fair neck and stared at Elfman, who had forcibly received the soul of the Beast King. She was very nervous. In Elfman's body, the consciousness belonging to Elfman and the soul of the Beast King were in a fierce struggle. As long as Elfman's consciousness could defeat the soul of the Beast King, then this crisis could not only be perfectly resolved, but also the powerful power of the Beast King could be obtained. Just like Myra's Satan soul, if the soul of the Beast King could be suppressed and mastered, Elfman would be able to receive the soul of the Beast King with his whole body and transform into the body of the Beast King. His strength would inevitably surge unprecedentedly. However, imagination is often beautiful, but reality is always so cruel. The strength of the Beast King is not comparable to that of Elfman at all. The gap between the two is not small. In this case, Elfman chose to forcibly receive it, and the probability of success was only 1 in 100. It can be said that his behavior was undoubtedly suicide. Elfman knew this, but he still did it. Myra also knew this, but at this moment, she could not give Elfman any help. She could only put her hands together and pray for him in her heart, praying that the 1% chance would appear, praying that, a miracle. However, if a miracle could happen so easily, then it would not be called a miracle. On the huge body of the Beast King, the light in the huge eyes flickered, sometimes showing a strange purple, and sometimes turning into inky black. But soon, this flickering situation changed. The strange purple completely suppressed the black and soon stabilized. At the same time, the two overlapping roars gradually faded. Below, Myra's praying hands slowly loosened, and her pretty face turned pale, because in the fading roar, Elfman's voice completely disappeared, leaving only the voice of the Beast King. What this means, there is no need to say more. Elfman's purple eyes looked at Myra below, without any emotion in his eyes, and he stepped forward step by step. Myra did not choose to run back. Although she had no power to fight back now, she still stood firmly on the open ground, looking at Elfman with tears in her eyes, and shouted loudly, "Elfman, cheer up! Sister Myra!" At this time, a blue bird flew in the sky, with a flash of blue light on its body, and it transformed into Lysina and landed beside Myra. She looked at the huge Elfman and asked, "Sister Myra, what happened? Where is brother Elfman?" "Run away, Lysina." Myra looked at Elfman with tears in her eyes and said, "It's all my fault for being too careless. In order to protect me, Elfman used all the magic he had absorbed to fight the Beast King. So that's it," Lysina looked at Elfman's huge body in surprise, with a bit of disbelief in her eyes. The Beast King's magic is too strong, Elfman can't suppress it at all, and now he has completely lost his mind. Myra said. "How could this happen?" Lysina supported the frail Myra and said in disbelief, "How could Elfman become like this? We have to wake him up quickly, otherwise he will be counterattacked and taken over by the Beast King." Myra said. Receiving magic, when receiving the soul of a monster, magic is two-way. If you can suppress the soul of the monster, you can absorb it and become the soul of the beast that receives magic, providing you with assistance. But if you cannot suppress it and it counterattacks you, it can also receive you. Therefore, the caster of receiving magic is extremely cautious when choosing to receive the soul of a monster. In addition to considering whether the monster is compatible with their own attributes, they also need to consider the strength. A situation like Elfman's would not happen if it was not forced. Elfman's brother, seeing Elfman losing his mind, Lysina suddenly put Myra down and walked towards him slowly with a calm expression. Lysina, what are you doing? Myra said in shock. When Lysina came to Elfman, the latter also stopped and lowered his head, as if he didn't understand what this tiny ant under his feet was doing. Brother Elfman, what's wrong with you? Lysina blinked her clear and pure eyes, looked up at Elfman, her voice was as clear as ever, she was not afraid of the huge beast king in front of her, as if this was still the brother Elfman she was familiar with. I am Lysina's sister, don't you remember me? And sister Myra? Lysina tilted her head and showed her sweet smile, I believe that brother Elfman will never forget us, right? Because Lysina and sister Myra both like brother Elfman the most. Lysina wanted to use the strong relationship between the three of them to awaken the irrational Elfman, but the real Elfman had completely lost consciousness. At this time, Elfman was completely controlled by the Beast King, and he could not understand the feelings between humans. Therefore, Lysina's naive behavior is no different from seeking death. Sure enough, the Beast King had no pity for her. He raised his arm high and swung it towards Lysina fiercely. No! Seeing this scene, Myra's eyes were about to burst, and tears flowed wildly from her eyes. At this moment, Charlotte's words before leaving once again emerged in her mind. Especially the last 4 words, it seemed as if they were engraved in her mind. Someone will die. Charlotte's words seemed to come true. But why? Myra felt a deep regret in her heart. Why? Why did her beloved brother and sister have to bear the consequences of her mistakes? If time could go back, she would definitely choose to listen to Charlotte's words and not contact the Beast King. Unfortunately, there is no if in this world, and time cannot go back. No, time may go backwards, but it doesn't happen here. Elfman's fist had already fallen, and Myra didn't even dare to look at what was about to happen. However, at this moment, the situation suddenly changed. Chapter 19. Deepest in the Mountains. Myra watched Elfman's huge fist swing at Lysina, but she could do nothing. Tears kept flowing down, and she gritted her teeth and cried. However, at this moment, there was a sound of breaking air in the air, and an incredibly fast figure suddenly appeared in front of Lysina, and then in the blink of an eye, it flashed up again, taking Lysina away quickly, leaving only a residual shadow lingering. And at this moment, Elfman's huge fist smashed down fiercely, accompanied by a loud boom, and the ground cracked. Countless cracks spread around like spider webs. It can be seen that the terrible power contained in this punch. If Lysina had not been taken away, she would have died if she was hit by this punch. That is. This scene also fell into the eyes of Myra, who was standing by. However, because it happened so quickly, she was unable to react for a while. When she came to her senses, she looked to the side with surprise, and then she saw a figure in a black robe squatting, and Lysina was being held firmly in his arms. Charlotte. Myra recognized the identity of the person at a glance. Although she was a little confused as to why Charlotte was here, she was more happy and grateful at this moment. Lysina was saved. Brother Charlotte. At that moment, Lysina felt a blur in front of her eyes, as if she was held in the arms of a warm body. When she saw the person in front of her clearly, a happy smile suddenly appeared on her face. Hearing this, Charlotte just turned sideways gently, looked at Lysina, and said lightly, "Why don't you run?" Although Charlotte's tone was very calm, Lysina still keenly felt the slight blame in it, but she was not annoyed at all, because she knew that Charlotte was caring about her. Because, Lysina looked up at Elfman and whispered, "I believe that Elfman will not do anything to Lysina." Elfman. Charlotte quickly reacted after hearing this, and looked at the huge Beast King's body, and said to himself, "Accept it by force." What an idiot! Charlotte snorted coldly. Elfman wanted to save Myra, so, Lysina defended Elfman, but before she could finish her words, Charlotte interrupted her, "That woman is even more of an idiot." Lysina knew that the woman Charlotte was talking about was her sister. She opened her mouth slightly and was about to say something, but Charlotte didn't give her a chance to speak. Instead, she looked at her directly, "And you? Also an idiot? Have you ever thought about how dangerous it is to do this? Have you ever thought about how your idiot sister will suffer if you get into an accident? Have you ever thought about how much guilt your idiot brother will feel if he regains consciousness and finds out that he killed his own sister with his own hands? Have you ever thought that if you die, they will live in pain and self-blame for the rest of their lives?" Lysina lowered her head, Her cute little mouth slightly pouted, feeling very aggrieved. She just wanted to wake up Elfman, but time was so tight that she didn't have time to think so much. Now after hearing Charlotte's words, she thought carefully and realized that she was indeed inconsiderate at the time. If things really turned out like that, then Myra and Elfman would probably be heartbroken. "Charlotte, be careful." At this moment, Myra's anxious cry came over. It turned out that the Elfman was furious when he saw that his surefire attack failed. When he found the culprit Charlotte who destroyed his attack, he suddenly punched him again. Charlotte had his back to the Elfman, but when the punch came, he seemed to have expected it. Even before Myra opened her mouth, he had already hugged Lysina, and his body turned into a residual image again, easily dodging the angry punch. Charlotte's figure flashed continuously, and in an instant he came in front of Myra, glanced at the latter with indifferent eyes, and then put Lysina down. "Take care of her." After that, he turned around and walked forward step by step, while looking at the Elfman with a grim look. "Lysina, you are not hurt, are you?" Myra kept looking at Lysina's body. After seeing that Lysina's body was intact without any signs of injury, she breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Lysina, you were too impulsive just now. Don't do this kind of thing in the future. I was almost scared to death." Fortunately, Charlotte showed up, otherwise. "I'm sorry, Sister Myra." Lysina lowered her head, her tone was very low. Myra was a little confused when she saw this. She glanced at Charlotte, guessing that Charlotte might have said something to Lysina that made the latter like this, but she didn't care at all, as long as her sister was safe. Thinking of this, she gently hugged Lysina in her arms, then looked at Charlotte and shouted, "Thank you, Charlotte." There was a strong sense of gratitude in her tone, without any of the previous pride, but Charlotte seemed to have not heard it, and still walked forward on his own. At this time, in his eyes, there was only Elfman who had transformed into the body of the Beast King. Chapter 20. Roar. Seeing the culprit Charlotte walking towards him, Elfman roared and punched him again. The huge fist continued to grow in Charlotte's clear and bright eyes. When it was about to hit Charlotte, Charlotte's body blurred and turned into a shadow. The next moment, it appeared on a huge rock on the other side. Charlotte glanced at Elfman calmly, and then his figure flashed again and again, and came to the other side of the mountain. Seeing this, Elfman stomped his feet hard, and his huge body, like a hill, ran at an incredibly fast speed, and in an instant he came in front of Charlotte. "Sister Myra, what is Brother Charlotte doing?" Myra and Lysina were paying close attention to Charlotte's actions. When the latter saw Charlotte go directly to the other side of the mountain, she immediately turned her head to look at Myra, puzzled. Looking at their current positions, Myra understood what Charlotte was doing and said, "He is moving the battlefield to protect us from being affected by the battle." At this point, Myra thought to herself, although he looks cold on the surface, he is a thoughtful man. After Lysina understood what Charlotte was doing, her favorability towards Charlotte increased again, but then she said nervously, "Sister Myra, do you think Brother Charlotte can save Brother Elfman?" "I have no idea." Myra shook her head. She couldn't answer her sister's question because she didn't know how strong Charlotte was. Although she hoped that Charlotte could defeat the Beast King, so that Elfman could regain his sanity. However, she had just fought with the Beast King not long ago, so she could be said to be the person who knew the Beast King's strength best. So she knew how difficult it was to defeat the Beast King. After all, she was so proud that she was defeated by the Beast King before, and her defeat was extremely miserable. Although Myra was very proud before, she became an S-class wizard at the age of 16. In the eyes of countless people, she was indeed proud enough. However, even so, she still lost to the Beast King. This shows how strong the Beast King is. Therefore, without knowing Charlotte's strength, she couldn't judge whether Charlotte had a chance of winning against the Beast King. However, although she didn't know Charlotte's specific strength, in the short time she had contact with Charlotte, Charlotte gave her a mysterious feeling, especially the speed he showed when he rescued Lysina just now, which made her understand that this wandering wizard was not simple. So she looked at Charlotte, who moved the battlefield to the other side, with a little expectation in her beautiful eyes. Maybe, he can really do it. Regardless of what Myra was thinking at the moment, on the other side, Charlotte had already officially started fighting with Elfman. Unlike the previous dodging with future prediction and super speed, this time, facing the fierce fist attack of Elfman again, Charlotte did not choose to continue dodging, but pulled his right hand to his shoulder. With a rip sound, the black cloth wrapped around the absolute sword behind Charlotte was lifted, and the absolute sword inserted in the ancient scabbard was revealed. Holding the absolute sword, Charlotte suddenly raised his right hand and held the absolute sword horizontally in front of him. At the same time, a powerful azure magic power whistled out of his body, and then all poured into the absolute sword. In an instant, a brilliant blue light bloomed on the ancient blade of the absolute sword with a scabbard. The next moment, Elfman's huge fist drove gusts of wind and suddenly fell, colliding with the absolute sword in front of Charlotte. With a loud rumble, the ground beneath Charlotte's feet suddenly collapsed, and cracks continued to spread in all directions. However, even so, Charlotte's figure holding the knife remained motionless, standing firmly on the shattered and unrecognizable ground, with only the black robe on his body fluttering in the wind, making a rustling sound. Whether it was the absolute knife in Charlotte's hand or Charlotte himself, even compared to the fist of Elfman, they all seemed so small. So the scene of Charlotte using the absolute knife in his hand to resist this punch was like an ant trying to shake a tree. It seemed that as long as the fist pressed down a little bit, it would be able to crush him and the knife together. But just this one point seemed to be frozen. No matter how much the strange power of Elfman's fist increased, it could never suppress that point. This scene of an ant trying to shake a tree seemed eternal. At this moment, Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly, and the azure light on the sword rolled back and turned into a sharp blade light, rising up. Elfman's fist was forcibly retracted almost instantly. Even with the thick skin of the Beast King, he felt a sharp stinging sensation under the sharp blade. At the moment when Elfman's fist was retracted, Charlotte also moved with it. A series of afterimages appeared in the air. At the end of the afterimages, Charlotte's figure appeared, with a cold light flashing in his eyes, and the sword in his hand swung down fiercely. Instant slash! The brilliant blade light shone in the sky, and in an instant it slashed on Elfman's chest. Under the sharp blade light, a huge blade scar appeared on the thick-skinned Beast King's body, and bright red blood flowed out crazily. Chapter 21. Did it work? On the other side, looking at Charlotte's brilliant sword slashing at Elfman from afar, although the view was not clear enough due to the distance, the bright red blood could still be vaguely seen, and Lysina immediately exclaimed. However, Myra on the side shook her head. If the Beast King was so easy to defeat, she would not have been defeated so miserably before. Although Charlotte's sword swing just now did make her a little surprised, it was not enough to defeat the Beast King with just one sword. After the slash, Charlotte's body fell down and he turned to look at Elfman. The blood mark on the latter's body was shocking, but Charlotte's face did not show any joy. Instead, his eyes became more solemn. The instant slash that he had used to deal with other monsters in the Beast King mountain range did not seem to work as well as he had imagined on Elfman, who was the Beast King. As expected, Elfman roared and waved his strong arms. A powerful magic suddenly burst out from his body. Most of this magic flowed into the shocking blood mark, and then the blood mark was seen to heal quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a moment, the blood mark disappeared from Elfman's body without a trace. This Beast King's body actually has such a terrifying self-healing ability. Fortunately, from the time when Elfman was slashed to the time when his wound healed, although his magic power was still extremely strong, Charlotte still caught a trace of disordered breath. In other words, the slash just now did not cause him any injuries, but this kind of injury was not fatal. Thinking of this, Charlotte took a deep breath, his eyes became sharp again, and his body jumped up again. In any case, this Elfman with the body of the Beast King was the strongest opponent he had encountered since his practice, and was also his ultimate goal in the Beast King Mountains. Such an opponent, no matter what his original purpose was, now he wanted to exercise his muscles and bones to see what level he had reached in the past 6 months of practice. Later, Charlotte and Elfman, one small and one big, one man and one beast, launched an amazing contest, and the violent degree of the battle was no weaker than the previous battle between Myra and the Beast King. Deep in the Beast King Mountains, the vibration sound was heard again frequently. On the other side, the Myra sisters were watching the battle between the two with full concentration. Because of her lack of strength, Lysina could not see too many clues in it. She could only let out 1 or 2 exclamations from time to time when the surface of the battle changed. Her 2 small hands were tightly clasped in front of her, and beads of sweat kept flowing out of her palms, showing the great tension in the little girl's heart at this time. As an S-class wizard, Myra, although she was seriously injured and no longer strong, this did not affect her vision as an S-class wizard at all. She saw much more clearly from the battle than Lysina. Although on the surface, Charlotte relied on her speed and exquisite swordsmanship and seemed to have the upper hand. Myra knew that Charlotte's attack fell on Elfman. Although it seemed to cause considerable damage to the latter, under his powerful magic self-healing, these injuries were actually much smaller than imagined and could not shake his foundation at all. If this goes on for a long time, it is very likely that Charlotte's magic power will be exhausted and he will be defeated. Of course, if Charlotte can use powerful magic to injure Elfman with one blow, then the result will be another matter. Myra does not believe that the Beast King can cheat again after cheating once. In fact, if Myra observes more carefully, she will find that when Charlotte launched an offensive against Elfman, the latter's attack on him seemed to be anticipated by Charlotte in advance, and his clever body movements quietly resolved it into nothingness. However, in this battle, what puzzled Myra the most was that from beginning to end, no matter how fiercely Charlotte fought, he never drew out the samurai sword in his hand, and he always fought with the scabbard. This strange behavior puzzled Myra. Shouldn't the sword be sharpest when it is out of the body? However, just as Charlotte did not know her past, she would not understand the story if she did not know Charlotte's past. Myra watched the two in the fierce battle. Although her expression did not seem to change much, she was actually as nervous as Lysina. However, after watching for so long, she was quite shocked by Charlotte, the wandering wizard she met for the first time today. The other party did not look older than her, and might even be younger than her. However, the fighting power and the experienced fighting experience he showed were not inferior to hers at all. She asked herself that even if she was in her prime, if Charlotte relied on her terrifying speed and exquisite swordsmanship, she would not be able to defeat him. This made Myra, who had no rivals among her peers except for the fairy queen Urza, pay more attention to this wandering wizard in her heart. Moreover, this kind of attention was based on the premise that Charlotte had saved Lysina's life just now, and it was simply an attention to strength. However, if Myra knew that Charlotte had only awakened magic for half a year, I wonder what she would think. At this time, on the other side, Charlotte stood on a mountain top, raised his sword, and slashed it out, but two blade lights appeared. Instant slash. Cross slash in the air. Chapter 22. Instant slash, cross slash in the air. Two dazzling sword lights condensed in the air, crossed and overlapped, forming a cross, flashing and cutting through the sky, first slashing on a huge rock. The cross sword light seemed to have no obstacles and passed through the huge rock. The next moment, two white marks appeared on the surface of the rock. The two white marks crossed from the center of the rock, also forming a cross. Silently, this huge rock was cut along the cross. The white mark of the word X suddenly split into 4 pieces of rubble. The split part of the rock was smooth and reflected light. After the X-shaped knife light passed through the huge rock, it continued to move forward and fell on Elfman. The knife light penetrated into Elfman's body, and blood splashed in an instant. The latter roared to the sky, and the sound was extremely miserable. At the same time, a large amount of magic power surged from his body, and kept whistling towards the wound where the blood was splashing. However, the blade light seemed to contain a mysterious and sharp aura, which accelerated the expansion of the wound and prevented the healing of the magic power. But with the continuous addition of magic power from Elfman, the mysterious and sharp aura finally dissipated, and the wound healed again. However, compared with the beginning, it obviously consumed more magic power this time, and it had already touched the root. However, Charlotte, who was standing on the top of the mountain, was still not satisfied with this. He tightly grasped the sword in his hand and whispered to himself, "It seems that with my current strength and means, I still lack a little to defeat him. Although because of the time and space, his training speed is the most terrifying in the entire magic world. But he has only been training for half a year. To reach this level in half a year is already extremely shocking, but there is still a little difference." However, although he said this, Charlotte's face still looked calm. His black robe fluttered without wind, and his deep eyes seemed to become brighter for some reason. At this moment, a ray of his mind penetrated into the space of time and quietly sank into the long river of time. The other side. Did Brother Charlotte also fail, seeing that such a powerful attack failed to defeat the Beast King's Elfman brother? Lysina said with some disappointment. Myra also sighed, looking at his brother's appearance at this time, feeling unwilling. If he could not defeat the Beast King who was controlling that body at this time, then his brother Elfman would not be able to recover his sanity, and he might even be completely attacked by the Beast King at any time. Wrong, looking at Charlotte standing on the top of the mountain from afar, Myra's beautiful eyes suddenly condensed. What is Charlotte doing On the top of the mountain. Charlotte's eyes suddenly closed at this moment, and the black robe on his body fluttered without wind. At the same time, in the space of that time, the long river of time rolled violently, raising blue waves. When Charlotte opened his eyes again, an extreme azure divine light burst out from his eyes, and at the same time, chants came out of his mouth. The left eye sees the past, the right eye sees the future. The time is about to open, time waits for no one. Through the past and present, looking, future, please. Forgive the author for making up such a stupid word. Along with Charlotte's singing, the azure divine light in his eyes became more and more dazzling, and in his eyes, it seemed as if mysterious runes were jumping out, leaping with amazing magical mysteries. At this moment, a strong azure light burst out from Charlotte's body, forming a beam of light, shining up and straight into the sky. At the same time, Charlotte suddenly shouted. When the eyes open, the long river appears. Recall the past and look forward to the future. As soon as the voice fell, the world suddenly changed. The sky, which was originally clear, suddenly darkened. Only the azure light column that broke through the sky was still shining brightly. Around the light column, the clouds rolled back. In a trance, it seemed to form a huge eye, which was watching all living beings from above the sky, and there was a mysterious and profound power emanating from it. At the same time, in Charlotte's left eye, the light flowed, as if there was a river surging in it. Not long after, a river formed entirely by blue light spots emerged behind him. At the moment when the long river appeared, all kinds of strange phenomena emerged in the deepest part of the entire Beast King mountain range. In some places, flowers and plants grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then withered. In some places, the green branches and leaves on the trees shrank and turned into branches and buds, and the thick trunks shrank and eventually turned into saplings. In some places, the rocks began to decay and collapse. In some places, the broken stones healed themselves. In short, all the places covered by the mysterious atmosphere, all kinds of strange visions appeared. During this time, Elfman seemed to be frozen, not daring to move at all, only his huge pupils, through the instinct of the beast, became terrified. Looking at the magical visions between heaven and earth, the Myra sisters were already stunned. Lysina had no idea what was going on and was completely stunned. As for Myra, while she was shocked, she also had some guesses in her heart. She had heard the old man in the guild mention that when some legendary super magic appeared, there would be scenes of changes in heaven and earth. Could it be that? Thinking of this, Myra looked at Charlotte, who was right below the center of the eye of heaven. Her beautiful eyes were full of brilliance, and she was filled with infinite expectations. However, Myra didn't know that not all super magics would cause heaven and earth phenomena, nor would heaven and earth phenomena accompany every use of super magic. The only thing that would really cause heaven and earth phenomena was the creation of super magic. Chapter 23. In this world, every kind of super magic is a treasure, and the birth of every super magic will resonate with the original energy of magic in the world, and then produce a strange phenomenon of heaven and earth, as if welcoming the arrival of another treasure. However, the existence of super magic is so rare, and the creation of super magic is so difficult. Everyone who can create super magic is a powerful wizard with a thorough understanding of his own magic and super magic attainments. As for the example of creating super magic at such a young age like Charlotte, I can only say that fate is wonderful. The magic he is currently performing is the time magic he conceived from his major breakthrough in time comprehension some time ago. Before that, after his continuous thinking, this magic already has a complete prototype of magic, but it has always lacked some maturity. Originally, Charlotte planned to come to the Beast King for testing after it was truly developed. It was just that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Because of Myra and the other two, he had to fight the Beast King one step ahead. Although the one who really fought with him was Elfman in the body of the Beast King, the one who really controlled this body was still the Beast King, so there was not much difference between the two. Now, although he was not 100% sure, Charlotte was also confident that he could successfully display the magic. Charlotte completely ignored the strange phenomena around him. He was now fully immersed in creating this super magic. When the eyes open, the long river appears, recalling the past and looking forward to the future. Above the sky, the eyes of the sky are shining. The eyes of time have opened. Behind Charlotte, the long river of time is shining brightly. The long river has appeared, recalling the past. But in Charlotte's left eye, light was flowing, as if there were pictures jumping one by one in it, and the pictures combined together were like the growth history of a boy. The baby was born, then the childhood, and finally entered the boyhood. In one scene, in a small village, a figure holding a sickle like the god of death was hanging in the air, destroying the entire village with a touch of his hand. The next scene was a boy standing at the head of the village. There were lonely graves in front of the village. The boy's back looked lonely and indifferent. The last scene was frozen on the top of a mountain. The boy had a huge eye on his head and a blue galaxy behind him. The boy was Charlotte himself. The picture that flashed in his left eye was his whole life. That is, at the moment when the picture in his eyes froze, a majestic mental force burst out from Charlotte's body and rushed to the long river of time. Above the long river, the blue river flowed wildly, until a certain moment, a figure jumped out of the river. The figure looked exactly like Charlotte, the only difference was that pair of eyes, which were completely lifeless and extremely empty, like a puppet. After the figure appeared, Charlotte did not cut off the output of his mental power. Instead, he gritted his teeth and mobilized his mental power even more frantically to send it into the long river of time. "This is not my limit." Charlotte gritted his teeth and shouted in a low voice, and then all the mental power in his body poured into the long river of time, and then he saw that in the long river of time, another figure jumped out and stood beside the figure at the beginning. The two figures stood side by side on the long river of time. Because of the exhaustion of mental power, Charlotte's face became extremely pale, but his eyes were flashing with a more dazzling divine light, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously rose slightly. "My past, my strength," Charlotte muttered in his heart, then opened his hands to both sides, and then shouted, "Past mode, open." As soon as the voice fell, the two Charlottes on the long river of time suddenly jumped out of the long river of time, and flashed into the body of Charlotte's original body. In an instant, a huge magic power like a tsunami gushed out of Charlotte's body, and the mountain top under his feet was directly shattered under this huge magic power. The so-called past mode is to summon the past self from the long river of time, and then bless the power of the past self to the original body. This is the power of the past. The strength of the past self cannot surpass the present self, but it can be equal to the present self. After all, he 10 years ago was the past, he a year ago was also the past, he an hour ago, and even he a second ago, all belonged to his past. Let me ask, is there any change in strength between the self an hour ago or the self a second ago and the self now? In this case, since he was going to summon the past, he would naturally summon the most powerful past. In other words, after Charlotte absorbed the power of several pasts, his strength would increase several times. Just now, Charlotte forced two past selves from the long river of time while squeezing his limit. The two past selves strengthened the original body. This is Past Mode X2. As Charlotte's past mode was activated, the strange phenomena around him began to disappear, and the eye of the sky in the sky and the long river of time behind Charlotte also dissipated. The appearance of these strange phenomena was because Charlotte was creating super magic. When Charlotte used this trick for the second time or more times in the future, the scene would not be as grand as it is today. At this time, after accepting the power of the past, Charlotte's appearance also showed some subtle changes. On his originally black bangs, there were a few strands of hair emitting azure blue luster, and the black pupils of his eyes were even more light blue. With every move, his temperament seemed more transcendent and unworldly. He clenched his fists gently, and felt the huge magic power in his body that was far beyond the past. Charlotte suddenly felt comfortable all over. He tilted his neck and looked at Elfman. A blue light flashed in his eyes, and he whispered, "You are in big trouble." Chapter 24. As Charlotte activated his new power, Past Mode X2, his combat power instantly doubled, which meant that he succeeded in creating magic this time. From the various strange phenomena that appeared between heaven and earth when Charlotte created this magic, and the powerful ability displayed by this magic, it can definitely be defined as a super magic. However, this super magic is completely Charlotte's super magic, because in the whole world, except for him, no one else can awaken the eye of time and control the power of time. Without this ability, even if you know the principle of this magic from Charlotte and have enough mental strength, it is impossible to perform it. Moreover, judging from the ability displayed by this super magic, it definitely has infinite potential. As long as Charlotte's mental will as the original body is stronger, the value that this super magic can bring to him will also be greater. In fact, this magic still has more amazing development space, but Charlotte is temporarily unable to perform it. The strange phenomenon in the surrounding heaven and earth disappeared, but the shock in the hearts of the two sisters Myra had not disappeared at all, but was even more severe than before. How is this possible? Myra stared blankly at the domineering figure on the top of the mountain, her beautiful eyes widened and her mouth slightly opened, as if she couldn't believe that such magic existed in the world. Although she was at a distance from Charlotte, she could still feel the huge changes that occurred in Charlotte before and after the strange phenomenon disappeared. The magic power that naturally emanated from Charlotte's body made her slightly shocked. She had no doubt that Charlotte's magic power at this moment was definitely several times more than before. This kind of magic that directly increased one's own strength by several times was something she had never heard of before. "Is this Charlotte's super magic, Myra?" murmured softly, looking at Charlotte with a somewhat inexplicable look. How many secrets does this mysterious wandering wizard hide? She was really curious. Charlotte didn't know that a woman began to have a strong curiosity about him. At this moment, he was immersed in the explosive and terrifying power in his body. At a time, so much power surged in his body. While enjoying this power, Charlotte actually had a kind of nouveau-riche thought in his heart, that is, to vent this powerful power well. As for the object of venting, it naturally fell on the Elfman in the body of the Beast King. His eyes, like a sharp sword, locked on the Elfman not far away. After the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth disappeared, without the huge pressure of the sky-high eyes in the sky, Elfman also returned to normal, but as long as he thought of the fascinating feeling just now, he would still unconsciously feel fear. When Charlotte's eyes locked on him, he suddenly felt a chill on his back and instinctively roared. If he was in a normal human form at this time, he would definitely be sweating and feel like sitting on pins and needles. Bang! The huge magic power in Charlotte's body suddenly burst out, and his whole body seemed to be burning with a layer of blue flames. He stomped his feet, and the whole person became blurred, and then disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the mountain top, which was already full of cracks, immediately shattered completely, turning into broken rocks all over the sky, and completely collapsed. Charlotte's body soared into the sky, with a blue flame tail behind him. His speed was not fast, but he seemed particularly light. He jumped between the rocks completely relying on his amazing jumping ability. Every time he stepped over a rock, the rock would shatter like the previous mountaintop. This scene looked spectacular. Not long after, Charlotte came close to Elfman, and jumped up again. The whole person came to the sky above Elfman, with a blue light flashing in his eyes, holding the knife in both hands. Without any fancy movements, he swung the knife straight down. Slash! With a shout, Charlotte's huge magic power roared out in an instant, and the sword burst into a dazzling light. At this moment, a sword pressure that was unrivaled in the world came down with a bang, as if carrying the power of heaven and earth, sweeping towards Elfman. I hope everyone will not get stuck in the horns of sword pressure. Roar, roar, roar. The sword pressure, with its unparalleled sharpness, washed over the Beast King body of Elfman frantically. The latter also had a strong magic power rushing up, competing with the sharpness of the sword pressure. However, this time, under the unparalleled sword pressure, Elfman was covered with scars all over his body, which was shocking. His powerful self-healing ability that had been invincible before did not work as well as before. Because his self-healing speed was far behind the speed of injury. In this regard, Elfman could only roar in anger, but he was powerless. He had already consumed a lot of magic power when fighting Charlotte before. Now facing the past Charlotte whose strength had doubled, it was even more impossible for him to be his opponent. He couldn't even fight back. Fortunately, the sword pressure did not last long. After the sword pressure disappeared, the whole body of Elfman was covered with blood. Even the ground under his feet was turned into countless powders under the sword pressure, and the whole area sank. Charlotte was very satisfied with his masterpiece. He did not use any moves just now. He just used the magic power of the absolute sword to crush him. The reason why Elfman performed so badly was that his current magic power was completely incomparable to Charlotte. If it was the ordinary Charlotte before, he would not be able to achieve this level with the same method. He would even be able to use too much magic power at one time, which would give Elfman an opportunity to take advantage of him. After Charlotte entered the past mode, the two were no longer in the same order of magnitude. After experiencing the powerful power in this mode, Charlotte had a good time and understood the power of the magic he created, so he lost interest in the Beast King's body of Elfman. So, let's end this battle. Chapter 25. Thinking of this, Charlotte held the knife in his left hand, looked calmly at the ferocious Elfman, clenched his right fist, stretched his body, and made a fist-swinging motion. A blue light flashed in his eyes, and a ball of blue light appeared on his right fist. Without any pause, he aimed at Elfman and swung a punch in the air. Whoosh! A beam of azure blue light whizzed out from Charlotte's right fist and pierced directly through the Beast King's body of Elfman. As Charlotte put down his right fist, Elfman's roar gradually faded, and his breath became weak. Then the strange purple light in his pupils dimmed, and his whole body began to shrink rapidly, and finally turned into Elfman's original appearance, and fainted on the ground. Elfman, brother Elfman! Soon, two shouts rang out at the same time, and then Myra and Lysina were seen rushing over here. Although Elfman's body had returned to its original state, he was still covered with scars. It was the first time that Lysina saw her brother injured so seriously, and she was shocked. Then she looked at Charlotte with tears in her eyes and said crisply, "Brother Charlotte, you are too cruel." Charlotte was still in the past mode at this time. His eyes flashing with a faint blue light gently glanced at Lysina and said, "I have shown mercy, otherwise, your brother Elfman would be dead." Although Charlotte's words were a bit ruthless, Lysina was a sensible girl. She also understood that it was a great joy for Charlotte to save Elfman. After all, he was the Beast King that even her sister Myra couldn't beat. So she nodded and said slowly, "Thank you, brother Charlotte." It's just that the depressed tone, Charlotte couldn't hear any gratitude in it. He raised his eyebrows. It seems that this straightforward little girl is not in a very good mood after seeing her brother end up in such a miserable state. Myra, however, took a look and found that her brother only had serious flesh wounds and was not in danger of death. She heaved a sigh of relief, then walked towards Charlotte and thanked him sincerely, "Thank you, Charlotte. If you hadn't arrived in time, the three of us might have died here." Her tone was particularly sincere, and Charlotte could feel that every word she said was from the bottom of her heart. However, Charlotte was not very impressed by this. He just said in a light tone, "I just came to meddle in other people's business." Hearing this, Myra immediately remembered the scene before she attacked the Beast King and Charlotte dissuaded him. At that time, she told Charlotte not to meddle in other people's business. Now it seems that the latter seems to be, "I feel a little bothered." But Myra was not annoyed by Charlotte's cold attitude, but thanked him again, "Thank you for your help and saving our people this time." Her tone was still sincere. If those people in the fairy tale guild who were very familiar with her saw this attitude, they would definitely be shocked. When did Myra Jane, a bad-tempered little girl, thank the same person twice in such a gentle tone, and even when the person's tone was not very friendly? This is totally unimaginable. Even Charlotte looked at Myra in surprise. As the person involved, he could naturally feel the huge changes in the latter. Although Myra was still dressed as a little gangster, there was no trace of the previous arrogance on her pretty face. Instead, she looked more like a gentle and lovely girl next door. It seems that this incident has had a great impact on this girl. She is not as stupid as imagined. Thinking of this, Charlotte couldn't help but look up to Myra, and then replied briefly, "Don't do it again next time." Yet. Myra's lips slightly raised, and a beautiful smile suddenly appeared on her pretty face. Although Charlotte's tone remained unchanged, she knew that when Charlotte said this, she had already let go of the bad feelings towards her in her heart. In fact, at this moment, Myra didn't think about why she cared so much about the attitude of this strange man who she had only known for half a day. Was it just because of his strong strength, or because he saved the three sisters, or both, or because of some other reasons that she herself didn't know? At this moment, Charlotte's mind suddenly shuddered. Under the puzzled gazes of Myra and Lysina, his figure blurred and quickly disappeared from the spot. In an instant, he appeared on the top of a hill. His eyes flashed with a little blue light, and he looked into the distance. In the past mode X2 state, not only did his magic power increase by 2 times, but other aspects also showed a significant increase to a greater or lesser extent. Just now, his perception became more acute, and he suddenly detected a very strange and special magic fluctuation. What is that? As Charlotte looked out, he could vaguely see a strange scene like a whirlpool in the distant sky. In the whirlpool, Charlotte could feel a very profound magical fluctuation, as if the center of the whirlpool was connected to another world. But just as Charlotte was curious and was about to go over to find out, his vision suddenly became blurred. He was startled and immediately found that the majestic magic power in his body began to quickly dissipate, as if it had returned to where it was supposed to belong.